Chapter 1906. Soon, Muronyu arrived in front of the second formation. If it had been before, Muronyu would not have stopped at all and would have passed through it directly. This was because his physique would not trigger these formations, let alone activate them. But now, Muronyu had the idea of devouring the power of the formation. Therefore, he restrained the special ability of his physique and stepped into the formation. Whoosh! The scene in front of him changed. In the next moment, Muronyu realized that he had appeared in an endless ocean. Upon closer inspection, it was not an ocean, but a world of water. Up, down, left, and right, it was all water. He immediately extended his enormous divine thought. However, Muronyu's expression changed very quickly. This was because he had extended his divine thought to the extreme, but he still could not see the end of the world of water. The heavenly thunder belongs to the gold of the 5 elements, while the world of water belongs to the water of the 5 elements. Could this be a 5 elements formation? Muronyu had a flash of realization. The formation that transformed into the world of water must be of a very high level. If he could not crack it, he would not be able to detect the end of the world of water and might even be trapped there. Who are these? They're all water elements. I could devour them all. Muronyu smiled faintly and immediately sat down with his legs crossed. Chaos Furnace, devour all of them. As Muronyu roared inwardly, the primal chaos furnace hidden within his body began to violently tremble. Then, waves after waves of terrifying, devouring power erupted from the furnace and swept in all directions. Rumble, the water elements around Muronyu surged like stormy waves. Under the devouring power of the chaos furnace, they surged into Muronyu's body. This was one of the changes of the chaos furnace after his physical body broke through to the chaotic realm. Previously, the chaos furnace could refine and refine all things. However, it only targeted solid objects such as aura and could not be refined directly. But now the chaos furnace was truly able to refine all things. Moreover, it had an ability similar to soul devouring. However, Soul Devourer could only devour souls, while the chaos furnace could devour everything. For example, this kind of gas or power was directly devoured. The furnace of chaos trembled slightly, and the power that had been devoured was refined into the most primitive and pure chaos power. Then, under the control of Muronyu, he began to distribute them onto his physical body. This was the second change of the chaos furnace. It allowed Muronyu to distribute the refined power. In the beginning, the power of the chaos furnace could only be used to increase Muronyu's power. Then, it could also be used to improve Muronyu's physical body. However, at that time, it was evenly distributed. His strength was the same as his physical strength. This kind of distribution was not bad, but made Muronyu's cultivation progress too slow. After all, Muronyu's appetite was simply too big. Now, Muronyu could freely distribute it. If he wanted to increase his strength, he could increase his strength. And if he wanted to improve his physical body, he could improve his physical body. However, now, Muronyu is only using the power of these formations to temper his physical body. There were 2 reasons why Muronyu did this. His appetite was too big. Although the power of these formations was powerful, the effect it had on increasing his strength was negligible. Moreover, even if he could increase his strength, Muronyu was not willing to do so. He did not want to expose his ability to directly refine power to improve his strength. That would definitely be a disaster for him. However, if he only used it to temper his physical body, although it was a little monstrous, at least it was within the normal range, and many people could accept it. Therefore, as Muronyu continued to go deeper, the power of the formations was completely devoured by him and fell apart. Sure enough, Muronyu's guess was not wrong. In addition to metal and water, fire, earth, and wood of the 5 elements appeared one after another. And the further it went, the more terrifying the power was. In fact, when it came to the last element of the 5 elements, wood, the power of the formation was comparable to a casual blow from a bright world realm ancestor. This formation alone was probably enough to kill most of the 100,000 people. However, for Muronyu, these formations were just pure power, and they were directly devoured by Muronyu. Unknowingly, Muronyu had already cracked the 5 elements formation. At this time, Sea Heavenly King, who was following closely behind Muronyu, had also arrived at the 4th formation, the Earth formation. Once again, Muronyu widened the gap between them. After devouring the power of the 5 formations, my physical body has finally stabilized its realm. However, there is still a long way to go before I reach the Bright World realm. Muronyu thought gloomily. He found that it seemed that his physical body's appetite was getting bigger and bigger. If this continued, it would be more and more difficult for him to improve his realm. This formation, fused with the 5 elements formation? Muronyu stood in front of a formation with a solemn look on his face. The 5 elements formation that had appeared before all appeared, and they combined perfectly into a new large formation. The 5 elements restrained and reinforced each other, and this large formation restrained and reinforced each other. It was a perfect fit. Boom! Without any hesitation, Muronyu punched the formation in front of him. Instantly, the array exploded with a terrifying multicolored light. A terrifying aura that could destroy heaven and earth burst out fiercely, and it shocked Muronyu so much that his soul trembled. This formation was already equivalent to the full blow of a rank 2 or even a rank 3 Bright World Realm expert. It was very terrifying. With Muronyu's current strength, if he did not rely on various treasures, he might be able to withstand a blow, but he would not be able to do so for most of the time. A large hand that contained the power of the 5 elements of metal, wood, water, fire, and earth was formed in an instant, and then it slapped towards Muronyu with a terrifying force. Muronyu is also full of heroic spirit. After a roar, he took a step forward and rushed forward. Extreme power instantly gathered on his right fist, and then he punched the large hand of power that was slapping down. Bang! The large hand of power was directly shattered. However, Muronyu spat out blood violently, and he was sent flying. Muronyu looked at the 5 elements formation with a gloomy face, and his eyes were flickering with light. Just now, he was shocked to find that the 5 elements formation did not suffer any damage. In fact, after he smashed the large hand of power that was derived from the 5 elements formation with a punch, the 5 elements formation had lost a lot of power. However, in less than an instant, it had already recovered to its peak. This was not because of the formation's power, but because of the mutual promotion of the 5 elements. Muronyu could feel that if he could not destroy one of the formations with a punch, then the formation would quickly recover to its peak and become an immortal formation. However, if he attacked, with Muronyu's current strength, he could not destroy one of the formations in one go. In this way, Muronyu could not break the formation at all. Next, Muronyu tried to devour the formation's power. However, this made him even more depressed. He could not devour the power. The 5 elements formation reinforced and countered each other, forming a perfect defense. Muronyu's devour was unable to break the seal and devour it. Do I have to pass through it directly? That would be too shocking. This thought flashed through Muronyu's mind, but he quickly rejected it. He would rather not join the Sun sect than expose his ability to pass through formations. If the Sun sect's higher-ups found out, it would be a disaster. However, if he could not break this formation, then he would not be able to pass. Thus, Muronyu sat cross-legged in front of the formation and sank into deep thought as he looked at it. As long as it's a formation, it's impossible for it to be perfect. There's no such thing as perfection in this world. There must be some flaws that I haven't seen through. Muronyu pondered as he began to search for the flaws in the 5 elements formation. Outside the sky-split tower, everyone's eyes were focused on Muronyu. When Muronyu had broken through the first 5 formations, it had been as easy as eating and drinking. Now, however, he couldn't break through them. Seeing this scene, even a fool would know that he was in big trouble. Even the 6 forefathers did not look good. They were not worried about Muronyu's ability, but whether their people could pass. Even a blind man could see the gap between the 6 heavenly kings and Murong-yu. If even Murong-yu could not pass through the formation, how could the others? Elder, this 5 elements formation is almost perfect. Even a half step to the creation realm forefather could not break it. Isn't it too difficult for these little guys to break it? The man from the Sun sect asked Elder Wong in confusion. There is nothing perfect in this world. Even in a dangerous place, there will be a trace of life. What we need to consider now is not their ability to break the formation, but their ability to find a way out, Elder Wong said indifferently. The two nodded slightly, but in fact they did not understand what Elder Wong meant. This formation is so powerful that it can't be broken by a chaotic void realm cultivator. Since chaotic void realm cultivators can't break it, why is it here? Is there another meaning? After observing the 5 elements formation for a while, Murong-yu gradually came to a realization. Although it is said to be breaking the formation, the point is to leave the sky-split tower. If it is to leave the sky-split tower, why do we have to break the formation? Can't we leave from other places and bypass this formation? When he thought of this, an idea suddenly flashed through Murong-yu's mind. Bypass it. That's right, bypass it. As long as we bypass this formation, won't it be easy to leave the sky-split tower? Murong-yu laughed and immediately stood up. This kid seems to have found a way to break the formation. Seeing Murong-yu's happy face, the people outside the sky-split tower thought so. However, to their surprise, Murong-yu did not move to break the formation. Instead, he circled the 5 elements formation. Then, under their shocked gazes, Murong-yu suddenly flashed and entered the 5 elements great array. Murong-yu has successfully passed. At that moment, an indifferent and emotionless voice sounded throughout Heaven Marshal City and the Sky-Split Tower. What's going on? Seeing this scene, everyone in Heaven Marshal City was stunned. Chapter 1907. Swish. At the same time, the scenery before Murong-yu's eyes changed, and he appeared in the independent space of the heaven-reaching tower. A pass just like that, not to mention the others. Even Murong-yu was a bit stunned. He had thought that there would be even more grand formations after the 5 elements grand formation, just like the first trial. 1,000 steps would be enough to pass, but there were still 2,000 steps after that. However, the second trial was so simple. This not only made Murong-yu gloomy, but it also made him gloomy because there were no more formations for him to devour to increase his strength. Previously, he had devoured 5 formations in a row, which had strengthened his physical body a bit. However, there was still a long way to go before he reached the bright world realm. 6 gazes filled with killing intent pierced through the layers of space and landed on Murong-yu's body. Murong-yu didn't need to look to know that these gazes belonged to the 6 strongest ancestors of the Heaven Marshal world. The more he was in the limelight, the more intense the killing intent these 6 people had for him. In fact, Murong-yu dared to guarantee that if it weren't for the Sun Sect's Elder Wong and the others overseeing this place, the 6 ancestors would definitely disregard their status and kill him. That little bastard Murong-yu passed again. The Sea Heavenly King, who was fighting in the 4th formation, was stunned. He was almost blown to smithereens by the immense power of the formation. This made him extremely furious, and his hatred for Murong-yu grew even more. The other 5 heavenly kings, the top 8 of the 4th region, and the 36 disciples of the Heaven Marshal world had similar feelings. In front of Murong-yu, they were like piles of trash, stepping stones for someone else. However, the happiest people were Murong-yu's fans. At this moment, the entire plaza and even the entire Heaven Marshal world was filled with heaven-shaking cheers. As Murong-yu's heaven-defying performances continued to appear, his fans also increased. Even the fans of the 6 heavenly kings, the top 8 of the 4th region, and the 36 disciples of the Heaven Marshal world had become Murong-yu's fans. Most of these people were die-hard fans. These kinds of fans were the easiest to defect. Moreover, this world worshipped the strong the most. Muronyu used facts to tell everyone that he was definitely stronger than the 6 heavenly kings. Don't you see that the 6 heavenly kings are just looking at Muronyu's back? Therefore, when Muronyu trampled the 6 heavenly kings under his feet again and again, he had unknowingly captured a lot of fans. Regarding this, Muronyu did not feel anything. He only felt a little regretful. This was because he could not continue to increase his strength in the second stage, and there was no reward for the first place. Moreover, he knew that he would definitely be one of the last 100 places. Therefore, he was not excited. Muronyu, who was sitting cross-legged on the ground, suddenly opened his eyes, and a look of surprise appeared on his face. The power of faith? I can actually sense the power of faith. Muronyu was shocked. The power of faith poured into Muronyu from the distant saint's world at all times. However, the power of faith was extremely weak. It did not have any substantial effect on Muronyu's current battle. However, just then, strands of extremely weak but extremely powerful power of faith had entered his body out of thin air, and then fused with the power of faith he had accumulated before. This power of faith, it's at least 100,000 times stronger than the power of faith in the saint's world. Muronyu was shocked. This is definitely the power of faith produced by a rebirth realm or even chaotic realm cultivator, Muronyu thought excitedly. If it was the power of faith produced by a rebirth realm or chaotic realm cultivator, it would be normal for it to be 100,000 times stronger than the power of faith in the saint's world. Even the weakest rebirth realm cultivator was more than 10,000 times stronger than the strongest 9-star world lord. It was even possible for it to be 100,000 times stronger. Who became my believer? Muronyu extended his consciousness in the space of the heavens connecting tower for the first time. However, he was given a fright by what he saw. Everyone in the sky was cheering his name, and all of them were extremely excited. Even Rebirth Realm, Chaotic Realm, and Bright World Realm ancestors had become his fans. There were so many fans, and their fanaticism was even more terrifying than the 6 heavenly kings. It was not impossible for some of the hundreds of millions of fans to become his believers. Less than 100. Muronyu carefully sensed that there were only 80 or so believers from the heavens martial world. However, although there were not many of them, the power of faith they produced had already surpassed all the power of faith in the saints' world combined. A smile appeared on Muronyu's face. It was extremely difficult to obtain believers in the endless starry sky. However, these 80 believers were a good start. These 80 believers were the sprouts of Muronyu's believers in the endless starry sky. With the efforts of these pioneers, more and more people became Muronyu's believers in the future. They provided Muronyu with a large amount of power of faith, which was extremely helpful to Muronyu. A month later, the cold voice rang out again. See, Heavenly King is the second to pass. The difference between the two was huge. See, Heavenly King had only barely passed after a month's time. When See, Heavenly King appeared in Muronyu's independent space, he was already in rags, like a beggar. Muronyu, the third trial will be your death. After See, Heavenly King appeared, an extremely violent, murderous aura enveloped Muronyu. After that, he sat down cross-legged and recovered his strength. Muronyu only glanced at See, Heavenly King indifferently. This guy had provoked him time and time again, and had successfully aroused his murderous intent. Once he had the chance, he would definitely kill him. In fact, if it wasn't for the selection of the Sun Sect, Muronyu would have killed him with a single punch. Otherwise, he would be buzzing around his ear like a fly all day long. After See, Heavenly King was Ice Heavenly King, but Ice Heavenly King was even worse than See, Heavenly King. He walked out half a month later than See, Heavenly King and successfully appeared. When there was no one left in the formation, 10 years had passed. However, fortunately, everyone was immortal. 10 years was just a blink of an eye. In the end, more than 700 people successfully passed. However, there were still too few peerless geniuses in this world. Among these 700 people, most of them relied on luck and accidentally left heaven-reaching tower. They didn't even know how they passed. Only a few dozen people managed to find a gap in the array like Muronyu and leave the sky-split tower. However, the time they left heaven-reaching tower was too different from Muronyu's. Senior brother, what's going on with this formation? I don't even know how I left. A cultivator who accidentally left heaven-reaching tower asked an expert who passed before him. That formation is invulnerable. We can't break it all. However, even if it's a dead end, there's still a ray of hope. This array formation opens a path of life for us challengers. As long as we find that passage, we can directly pass through the formation and leave heaven-reaching tower. So it's like that. The surrounding people couldn't help but be enlightened. They all finally understood. Since it's like that, then isn't that Muronyu very heaven-defying? He found a passage to life so quickly. Someone let out a cry of surprise. Immediately, most of the people's gazes landed on Muronyu. It's just luck. Just like me, I accidentally came out. What talent could he have? Someone immediately said disdainfully. It wasn't the 6 heavenly kings, nor the top 8 of District 4 or the 36 sky martial disciples. It was the other people who passed. In reality, although Muronyu's monstrous talent won him a large number of fans, it also made many people jealous of him. In this world, there was never a lack of narrow-minded people like Sea Sky King who would be jealous of others. Moreover, everyone was a competitor. Naturally, it didn't like others. As soon as these words were spoken, many people voiced their agreement. There were also some people who coldly looked at the envious people and sneered in their hearts. So many people were stuck at the final stage. Why was it that Muronyu was the only one who easily found the path to life, and not the others? This was no longer luck but strength. Thus, those who clearly understood this came over to greet Muronyu. They wanted to befriend Muronyu. After all, with Muronyu's monstrous talent, he would definitely be able to pass. Once he became a disciple of the Sun sect, with his monstrous talent, his status would definitely rise. If they didn't befriend him now, when would they? To these people, Muronyu wasn't cold, but he wasn't very warm either. He was just responding out of politeness. After everyone rested for a month, the third and final stage began. This stage wasn't about breaking through. Instead, it was a test of battle strength. Only the last 100 people with the strongest battle strength would be able to pass. The first stage was perseverance, the second stage was comprehension, and the third stage was battle strength. There were no rules in the third stage. Apart from the fact that they weren't allowed to use origin tools and otherworldly possessions, they could use all kinds of magical powers at will. Little bastard, you better not lose too early. After receiving his number plate, the Sea Sky King came to Muronyu's side and grinned viciously. Muronyu was number 1, and the Sea Sky King was number 2. The number plates were arranged according to the time taken to pass the second stage, which was the ranking of the second stage. Did you eat sh*t? Why is your mouth so smelly? Muronyu looked at the Sea Sky King with disgust. This guy was really despicable. He had only surpassed him, but he was so jealous of him. Those who didn't know would think that Muronyu had killed his parents. This hatred was irreconcilable. The Sea Sky King was startled, and then his face became even more ferocious. However, he didn't say anything and just left quickly. He had already made up his mind to kill Muronyu in the competition. Although killing was strictly prohibited, he could just find an excuse when the time came. This little bastard actually offended the Sea Sky King. He's dead. The 36 sky martial disciples gathered together and looked at Muronyu with joy in their hearts. The battle strength of the 6 heavenly kings has definitely surpassed the chaotic space realm. It is said that they have already reached the bright world realm. Although this little bastard is strong, he is only a level 3 chaotic space realm. He will definitely die, Tian Kongzi said with a ferocious face, his eyes full of resentment. Chapter 1908. The third stage of the competition began very quickly. Lots were drawn to fight. In the independent space, 10 independent arenas had already appeared. Each ring could provide 20 people to fight. As number 1, Murong Yu was honorably chosen to be the first to go on stage, and his opponent was Tian Kongzi, one of the 36 Sky Martial disciples. Murong Yu took a step forward and already appeared on the ring. His opponent, Tian Kongzi, slowly walked up with a dark face. In the end, Murong Yu knocked this guy down with a punch, and Tian Kongzi was still using his origin tool at that time. Now, he was not allowed to use origin tools and otherworldly items. Obviously, Tian Kongzi knew that he was not Murong Yu's opponent. However, he was the first to fight. After all, and in front of hundreds of millions of spectators, Tian Kongzi could not lose face and directly admit defeat. "Kill!" Tian Kongzi roared. It wasn't clear if he was trying to muster up his courage or something else. Then, he unleashed all of his strength and charged at Murong Yu. "Loser!" Murong Yu shook his head. Only when Tian Kongzi was right in front of him did he send out a kick. "Pooh!" Tian Kongzi felt his vision blur, and then he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. The intense pain almost made him faint. In the next moment, he felt himself flying backward violently. With a plop, he fell to the ground. Looking left and right, he had already fallen to the ground far away from the ring. He was kicked out of the ring by Murong Yu, and he did not even have time to react. "Good. Murong Yu, good job." Outside the ring, Murong Yu's fans cheered wildly. Murong Yu nodded to the crowd and then floated down the ring. These people were his fans, and they had the potential to become his believers. Therefore, for the power of faith, Murong Yu would definitely not ignore them. First ring, Murong Yu wins. The referee was a high-level Bright World Realm ancestor, an ancestor of the 6 major forces. Although he wanted to judge Murong Yu's loss, he did not dare. Tian Kongzi stood up with a pale face. He first looked at Murong Yu with incomparable hatred, and then walked toward his own camp. Although he had failed this time, it did not matter. He still had another chance. If he failed both times, then he could be eliminated directly. Basically, after Murong Yu won this time, he could directly advance to the second round. Therefore, he did not fight for a long time. The 6 Heavenly Kings, District 4's top 8, the 36 Sky Martial disciples, and those dark horses all. Even the unlucky Tian Kongzi, who had met Murong Yu in his first match, managed to make it to the second round. When Murong Yu, who was in District 4's top 8. District 4's top 8 were not the 36 Sky Martial disciples, and they did not have any enmity with Murong Yu. Moreover, this Xiao Tianwen was not as narrow-minded as the Sea Heavenly King. Of course, this was just on the surface. Who knew the real situation? Murong Yu, your performance is very monstrous, and I guess your battle strength is not to be underestimated. However, I will still fight with my full strength. Standing opposite Murong Yu, Xiao Tianwen said with a smile. Murong Yu nodded slightly. This Xiao Tianwen's strength was not bad. His realm had already reached the half-step Bright World Realm. Even if he could not unleash the strength of a Bright World Realm expert, he could still defeat a large group of peak Chaotic World Realm existences. However, if that was the case, he was still not Murong Yu's opponent. Murong Yu did not show mercy. He used 60% of his strength and fought with Xiao Tianwen. Although it was only 60% of his strength, Xiao Tianwen still could not resist. After fighting for a long time, Murong Yu finally blasted Xiao Tianwen out with a punch. Murong Yu won another round and had already entered the third round. Xiao Tianwen, how is Murong Yu's strength? Returning to District 4's top 8 camp, the other top 7 hurriedly asked. Unfathomable. Xiao Tianwen took a deep look at Murong Yu in the distance, and then said in a deep voice. Shen Miaoshuan and the other 6 were shocked. Although Xiao Tianwen was not the strongest among the 8 of them, his strength was definitely not bad. Moreover, Xiao Tianwen's evaluation of Murong Yu was much higher than that of the Sea Heavenly King and the other 5. His evaluation of the Sea Heavenly King and the others was very strong. Very strong and unfathomable could not be mentioned in the same breath. They were not on the same level at all. If you meet him, then admit defeat. You are not his opponent. Xiao Tianwen said with a smile. He was not dejected because of the defeat at all. You don't seem to resent Murong Yu. AI Xiaoya of District 4's top 8 looked at Xiao Tianwen strangely. Xiao Tianwen shook his head slightly with a smile. Do you think I am an idiot like the Sea Heavenly King? I still have self-awareness. Moreover, Murongyu is a person who can only be on good terms and not bad terms. I have even guessed the fate of the Sea Heavenly King. When he said this, Xiao Tianwen's face showed a touch of disdain. Although the 6 Heavenly Kings had always been above them, the top 8 of District 4 did not submit to them at all. They all felt that the 6 Heavenly Kings were just SOSO. If they were not born a good force, they would have been ordinary long ago. When Murongyu appeared again, he did not meet any of the 6 Heavenly Kings, District 4's top 8, or the Sky Marshal 36 Signs, but a rapidly rising dark horse. Brother Murong, I admit defeat. The person jumped onto the stage and immediately admitted defeat. Murongyu was startled. Although he had defeated District 4's top 8, he did not seem to be strong enough to defeat them without a fight. At this time, his opponent blinked his eyes and said, Senior Brother Murong, I am your fan. I hope that you can trample Sea King and the others under your feet again. After saying this person jumped off the stage. Murongyu helplessly shook his head. Now, even the contestants had become his fans? In the following time, Murongyu went on the stage several times, but many times his opponents directly admitted defeat. Seeing this scene, Murongyu's fans naturally became more and more excited. The Sea Heavenly King and the others were very angry, because no matter who the Sea Heavenly King met, those people would rush up and fight him. No one admitted defeat. Didn't this mean that the Sea Heavenly King was far inferior to Murongyu? Very quickly, the 100 spots appeared. Murongyu, the 6 Heavenly Kings, District 4's top 8, and the 36 Sky Marshal Sages were all included. In addition to the 51 of them, there were 49 cultivators from various large factions or rogue cultivators. Originally, the selection should have ended by now. However, there was still a ranking, and the first place had a very generous prize. Whether it was for the prize or for the believers, Murongyu decided to fight until the end. This time, there's only one chance. If you fail, you will only be at the bottom. The first round, Murongyu against the Sea Heavenly King. A high-level Bright World Realm judge said. Ha ha ha. The Sea Heavenly King jumped onto the stage and laughed. Do you know that your laughter is very disgusting? Murongyu slowly flew up and said to the Sea Heavenly King with a face of disgust. The Sea Heavenly King's expression froze as if he had eaten a pile of shit. Then he sneered, Little bastard, although you have passed, you can only be ranked 100 against me. Murongyu shook his head, took a step forward, and rushed to the Sea Heavenly King's side. Then he punched the Sea Heavenly King's head. Boom! The Sea Heavenly King felt that his soul was about to be shattered. His vision turned black, and he couldn't tell north from south. At the same time, he felt a sharp pain in his abdomen. Then, he floated up and flew backward. The Sea Heavenly King was very angry. He wanted to fly up, but his strength was not under his control. In the end, he fell to the ground outside the ring with a bang. Boom! Seeing this scene, it was as if time had suddenly stopped. Everyone was stunned, but soon they reacted and began to roar one by one. Murongyu! 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 Murongyu's fans were the first to shout, but soon more and more people joined the ranks of cheering and shouting. The Sea Heavenly King, the leader of the 6 Heavenly Kings, was sent flying by Murongyu in one move. Was this a disgrace? Was it because Murongyu was too powerful? No, this was because the Sea Heavenly King was useless. This guy was simply fishing for fame. Gold and jade on the outside, rotten on the inside. This kind of trash deserves to be called the strongest chaotic realm expert in the Sky Marshal world. This is an insult to us. We used to be his fans and worship him. It turns out that he is a big idiot. He is simply a waste. One of the Sea Heavenly King's fans shouted in disappointment. Like a lit fuse, more and more fans joined in the scolding war. As the saying goes, the greater the expectation, the greater the disappointment. The Sea Heavenly King's performance completely disappointed his fans. You are shameless. You sneak-attacked me. The Sea Heavenly King's face turned green and white. Finally, he jumped up and roared at Moronyu. Moronyu looked at the Sea Heavenly King with a smile. Idiot, don't you know that you talk too much nonsense? Is your so-called reputation as the Sea Heavenly King just piled up with nonsense? Boom! Upon hearing Moronyu's words, many people burst into laughter. Unconsciously, they began to despise the Sea Heavenly King in their hearts. Even the Ice Heavenly King's reputation was rapidly declining. There was no other way. Who asked them to be in the same group? As the saying goes, birds of a feather flock together. The Sea Heavenly King was like this. Presumably, they were not much better. Sea Heavenly King, get lost! A voice suddenly came from the crowd. Then, more and more people roared, shouting for the Sea Heavenly King to get lost. Little bastard, you will definitely die in my hands. At that time, I will make you beg for death. Hearing the roars of the crowd, the Sea Heavenly King's face was incomparably pale. He felt that all of this was given to him by Moronyu. If not for Moronyu, how could he lose his reputation? If not for Moronyu's sudden appearance, the first place would have been his. How glorious would that be? But Moronyu had taken away everything that originally belonged to him. Therefore, his hatred and resentment for Moronyu grew more and more. Chapter 1909. No matter how much Sea Sky King roared, he was still defeated and thoroughly defeated. Moreover, because Moronyu was in the limelight in the previous 2 rounds, he had already gained a lot of fans. Although Moronyu was indeed suspected of using a sneak attack, in this world where the fist was the truth, a victory was a victory, and a defeat was due to a lack of skill. Therefore, not only did the crowd look down on Moronyu, they even cheered. And Moronyu no longer cared about Sea Sky King. He had never treated Sea Sky King as an opponent. At most, Sea Sky King was just a stepping stone for him to reach a higher realm. Indeed, Sea Sky King, the other 5 Heavenly Kings, District 4's top 8, and the 36 Sky Martial Disciples were all stepping stones. For the rest of the competition, anyone who met Moronyu would automatically forfeit. What a joke! Moronyu may have used a sneak attack when he defeated Sea Sky King, but if one did not have a certain level of strength, even if Sea Sky King did not move, one might not be able to knock him off the stage. District 4's top 8 and the 36 Sky Martial Disciples were the same. However, the remaining 5 Heavenly Kings were of the same spirit, and naturally would not admit defeat. Moreover, they wanted to avenge Sea Sky King, and threatened to knock Moronyu off the stage. But the cruel truth told them that no matter how hard they tried, and how many terrifying moves they unleashed, in the end, they were all defeated by Moronyu. And Moronyu's victory over the 5 Heavenly Kings made his fans go crazy with excitement. Before, there were people who criticized Moronyu for not being a match for Sea Sky King, and for only using despicable methods to win. But after Moronyu defeated the 5 Heavenly Kings, the voices that questioned Moronyu all disappeared. Moronyu naturally became the first in the 3rd round without any suspense. Furthermore, due to him taking first place in the first 2 rounds, Moronyu had become the champion of this year's selection. In the end, he had even received a mysterious gift. 2 gifts in the 1st round, no reward in the 2nd round, and 2 gifts in the 3rd round. In total, Moronyu received 4 rewards. One had to know that even Elder Wong had declared that these were great gifts. In fact, the 2 blessed realm experts from the Sun Sect looked at 1 or 2 of the gifts with envy. Even they were envious of these gifts. One could only imagine how important these gifts were. Thank you, Elder Wong and the 2 seniors. Feeling the envious gazes of the 2, Moronyu first put away the gifts into the Hichu Luo Shu, and then thanked them in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. Young man, you have good potential. I hope you can join the Solar Sect and become one of us. Elder Wong smiled and patted Moronyu on the shoulder. Moronyu's face revealed a flattered expression, while the 2 blessed realm experts behind Elder Wong were stunned. Although this Elder Wong was usually amiable to others. He had a very high opinion of himself, and had basically never praised anyone. This was the first time they had seen him treat Morong-yu so well. However, Morong-yu quickly came to his senses. He bowed to Elder Wang and asked, "Elder Wang, are the 100 of us not considered disciples of the solar sect?" Lung Xingchang, the young man from the solar sect, was now known to Morong-yu and the other person's name. Perhaps because of Elder Wang's attitude towards Morong-yu, Lung Xingchang was very polite to Morong-yu. "Of course not. This is our first selection. This time, we are recruiting disciples from the entire solar system. In the solar system, there are more than 10 million Trinity planets like the Tianwu world. Apart from the Trinity planets, we are also recruiting disciples from other planets. Although each origin star only had 100 people, the total number added up was very terrifying. However, the solar sect is only recruiting 10,000 disciples this time. The other disciples will eventually be sent back. Among the Trinity planets, the Tianwu world is just ordinary. The top geniuses in the Tianwu world, like the Sea Heavenly King, are just common goods in some of the planets." Gasp after hearing Lung Xingchang's words. Many people, including Morong-yu, could not help but gasp. The Sea Heavenly King was already considered the top genius in the Tianwu world, but if he was just common goods, then what were they? Moreover, these words came from the mouth of a creation realm elite. Even if there were some exaggerations, the credibility was still very high. Only the Sea Heavenly King and the other Heavenly Kings felt indignant, but they did not dare to do anything. What a joke! How could they refute the words of a creation realm elite? Even their patriarch would not dare to do so, let alone them. Morong-yu was also a little worried. He was originally a little arrogant. After all, he was already an invincible existence in the chaotic space realm. However, after listening to Lung Xingchang's words, he let go of the last trace of arrogance in his heart. There is never a lack of geniuses in the endless starry sky. Because the name list had already been confirmed, Elder Wang still gave the 100 people a month's time to go back to their respective homes. After making the proper arrangements, they would then leave the Tianwu world and head to the solar system. However, for those who did not leave, Elder Wang also opened the heaven stairway to the heaven connecting tower. At this time, everyone knew the use of the heaven stairway. Therefore, some of the people who did not return directly climbed the heaven stairway and used the gravity to refine their physical bodies. On the other hand, Morong-yu had nothing to do. This was because the gravity of the heaven stairway no longer had any effect on him. However, he did not leave the heaven connecting tower. This was because his identity had been exposed. The 6 patriarchs and some other forces would definitely not let him go. Although Morong-yu was not afraid, he knew his own limits. Therefore, he chose to cultivate in the heaven connecting tower. On this day, Morong-yu woke up from his cultivation. It turned out that a day had already passed since then. In the independent space of the heaven connecting tower, Elder Wang looked at the 100 top young geniuses of the Tianwu world who were lined up neatly in front of him. I'm sure you all know that although you have passed, you are still unable to join the Sun sect directly. You still need to go through the final selection. This time, we will send you to a 4-element star world. You only have one goal, and that is to survive. Stay alive and persevere until the last 10,000 people. Only those 10,000 people are qualified to become disciples of the Sun sect. Elder Wang paused for a moment and glanced at the crowd. Then, he continued in a deep voice, "Remember, this time, you'll be going to a 4-elements planet. There are ferocious beasts that have reached the creation realm. Therefore, your lives will be in danger. If you're not willing to take the risk and would rather stay at the top of the Tianwu world, you can still withdraw." Everyone fell silent. Each of them had a conflicted expression on their faces. Even Morong-yu's pupils constricted. There were creation realm ferocious beasts. Not to mention creation realm ferocious beasts, even high-level bright world realm ferocious beasts were not something they could resist. However, the Sun sect didn't give them any missions. Their only mission was to survive. However, to survive in front of a creation realm ferocious beast, that was a difficult task. However, if they could survive and become a disciple of the Sun sect, they would be like carps leaping over the Dragon Gate. Even the weakest disciple of the Sun sect would have a higher status than the 6 ancestors of the Tianwu world. Thus, although everyone was struggling in the beginning, and their hearts were in turmoil, in the end, they all gritted their teeth and made the decision. No one withdrew. As for Morongyu, did he even have a way out? Even if it was a 5 elements planet, he wouldn't withdraw, let alone a 4 elements planet. Very good, no one withdrew. I hope that you can persevere until the end. Elder Wang smiled faintly. With a wave of his hand, a jade slip appeared in front of Morongyu and the others. This is a test for you. The Sun sect isn't sending you to your deaths. Therefore, if you encounter something you can't resist during the test, you can crush this jade slip. At that time, the experts of the Sun sect will rush over to save you. Of course, if you can't persevere until the experts arrive, you can only blame your bad luck. Everyone heaved a sigh of relief when they received the jade slip. With this jade slip, if they really couldn't persevere, they could crush it. At least they had one more life-saving method. Next, Elder Wang said a few more words of caution, and then kept the Tong Tian Tower. Morongyu and the others naturally stayed on the heaven-reaching tower. Elder Wang and the other 2 quickly left the Tianwu world with the heaven-reaching tower. Shua. A month later, Morongyu, who was in the middle of cultivation, felt an incomparably powerful force acting on his body. Before Morongyu could react, he found himself in an unfamiliar space. This space is a little strange. Morongyu thought to himself as he sized up his surroundings. At first glance, the surroundings were no different from an ordinary world. However, Morongyu still felt that something was wrong. Yuan Qi. Although the Yuan Qi of heaven and earth is denser than the Tianwu world, the Yuan Qi of heaven and earth in the 4 elements planet can only be at this level. Moreover, Morongyu quickly realized that something was wrong. In addition to the Yuan Qi of heaven and earth, Morongyu also felt death Qi. Yes, although the surroundings were filled with vitality, there was a faint death Qi mixed in with the Yuan Qi of heaven and earth. It gave Morongyu a familiar feeling, but he couldn't recall it at the moment. Morongyu frowned slightly. This death Qi is the reason why the 4 elements planet is about to be destroyed. This 4 elements planet has already died of old age. If we are lucky, we might even be able to obtain a star core of the 4 elements planet. At this moment, Hichu's voice sounded in Morongyu's mind. Hearing Hichu's words, Morongyu finally reacted. This death Qi gave him a familiar feeling. It was because he had often encountered this situation in the past. In the sacred world, as long as one hadn't reached the undying realm, there would be a limit to one's lifespan. Those cultivators who were nearing the end of their lifespan would have this death Qi. Chapter 1910. This was an origin star that was about to die. Moreover, it was an origin star that would naturally die of old age. Hichu had mentioned before that a planet that died due to natural aging would give birth to an extremely precious star core. Whether it was an ordinary planet or an origin star, it would form a star core. Previously, the star core that Morongyu had obtained from young Master Yun was a star core formed after an ordinary planet died. Even so, if the news that Morongyu had a star core spread out, even Creation Realm experts would want to snatch it. Moreover, this was 4 origin star. A 4 origin star core? Not to mention the Creation Realm experts. Even experts of a higher realm would try to snatch it away. Now, there was a problem. Why did the Sun sect place Morongyu and the rest here when they knew that this 4 origin star was about to die? This 4 origin star was not an ordinary one. Usually, there were countless beasts and cultivators of various races on 4 origin star. However, before coming here, Morongyu and the rest had already known that this was a 4 origin star with no cultivators. It was a 4 origin star that only had beasts. As for why, it was a long time ago when all the cultivators on this 4 origin star suddenly disappeared overnight. Back then, there were Creation Realm experts on this 4 origin star. Then, this 4 origin star naturally became a world of beasts. Of course, this was For Origin Star, which had extremely rich heaven-earth essence chi. It could even produce creation realm experts. Therefore, many cultivators flew over from all over the endless starry sky, wanting to leave their Tao, teachings, and inheritances here. However, without exception, these forces all ended up the same. They all disappeared overnight. No one knew where they went or how they died. Therefore, later on, no one dared to leave their inheritances and Tao teachings here. In the end, this place slowly became a world of beasts. However, many cultivators still came here to search for treasures. This was because before this For Origin Star was an extremely powerful origin star with extremely powerful inheritances and all sorts of high-level treasures. The Sun Sect had placed Murong Yu and the rest here to train, not only because they wanted them to last until the end, but also because they wanted them to search for treasures. It's definitely not that simple. Murong Yu's expression was somewhat gloomy. He didn't think that the Sun Sect would simply let them train here. He already smelled the scent of a conspiracy. In less than an instant, Murong Yu could feel that the death chi in this four-essence star had become denser. In other words, this origin star could die of old age at any time and then walk towards death. Once a stellar core was born, it would definitely attract a large number of almighties to fight for it. Under the terrifying battle prowess of a manifestation stage practitioner, Murong Yu and the others would probably be blasted into smithereens before they could even react. Moreover, Murong Yu even felt that the strongest person in the fight for the Star Core was definitely not someone in the Blessed Realm, but someone with a higher realm. At this moment, there might be countless experts watching from the endless starry sky outside For Origin Planet. Strength. In the end, I'm still not strong enough. Murong Yu roared in his heart. He was furious. Although he had the battle prowess of a low-level bright world realm practitioner, he was still an ant in the face of a manifestation stage practitioner. So what if he knew that the Sun Sect was plotting something? Without sufficient strength, he could only roar in his heart. He didn't even have the ability to escape from For Origin Planet. If he had the strength of a manifestation stage practitioner, he would at least have the ability to protect himself, even if he couldn't defeat all the manifestation stage practitioners. Boom! Suddenly, a fierce gust of wind shot out from behind Murong Yu, tearing the sky and earth apart. Murong Yu's pupils abruptly shrank as he slowly turned around, only to see an incomparably large fist exploding through the air and violently smashing towards him. "You're courting death." A murderous intent flashed past Murong Yu's heart as he threw out a punch. Bang! Before the incomparably large fist could reach Murong Yu, it was smashed to pieces by Murong Yu's fist. Ah! A young man walked over from afar and stopped in front of Murong Yu. He looked at Murong Yu with contempt. That trash from a low-level primordial planet? How dare you participate in the Sun Sect trial when you're merely a level 3 chaotic space realm practitioner? Fine, since you've met me, I'll send you back. The young man said disdainfully as he stomped down on Murong Yu, intending to stomp Murong Yu to death. The young man was in level 9 Chaos Void Realm. In truth, most of those who'd passed the Sun Sect's first trial were in level 9 Chaos Void Realm, with the exception of a handful who weren't in the Chaos Void Realm. After all, there was no other freak like Murong Yu who could fight across a few small realms or even an entire realm. Of course, there were still freaks who could fight across a small realm, but they were still in the minority. If Murong Yu had really been a level 3 chaotic space realm practitioner, the young man's stomp would have killed him without a doubt. However, Murong Yu was no ordinary level 3 chaotic space realm practitioner. This level 9 chaotic space realm practitioner was just a clown in front of him. Thus, Murong Yu stretched out his hand and grabbed at the youngster's foot. Disdain flashed across the young man's face. In his eyes, Murong Yu's actions would only hasten his death. But very quickly, the disdain on his face disappeared without a trace and was replaced by fear. In the blink of an eye, Murong Yu had already grabbed the youth's ankle and smashed him down with all his might. Bang! The young man didn't even have time to react before he was smashed to the ground. For some reason, the ground suddenly became extremely hard when he smashed down. For the first time, the young man's muscles and bones were all shattered. However, an incomparably powerful life force quickly surged into his ankle. In the blink of an eye, the injuries all over his body were healed. However, at this moment, with a bang, Muronyu lifted him up and smashed him to the ground again. The next moment, an incomparably powerful life force surged into his body again. Poor guy. Muronyu was furious at this time, and this guy walked over. He could only become Muronyu's punching bag. Bang, bang, bang. It wasn't until Muronyu smashed the young man hundreds of times in a row that the anger in Muronyu's heart subsided a little. Then, Muronyu shook his hand and directly shattered the young man's body and soul into pieces. Muronyu was never merciful to people who wanted to kill him. Being merciful to the enemy was being cruel to oneself. Muronyu wasn't that stupid. After killing the young man, Muronyu took out a jade slip that the Sun Sect had given him to take a look. At this moment, the jade slip was constantly flickering with light. Every time the light flickered, it meant that a person had died or been teleported out of Foryuan planet. Those who had died might have been killed by other cultivators who had entered the planet, or they might have been eaten by powerful beasts. One had to know that when they entered Foryuan planet, they would appear randomly. Some people might even appear in the lair of some blessed realm ferocious beasts and be eaten as snacks. However, the number displayed on the jade slip was still very terrifying. It had already exceeded 100 billion. In other words, more than 100 billion people had been sent to Foryuan planet to participate in the training this time. 100 billion people to fight for 10,000 spots. However, this number was decreasing at a terrifying speed. It was believed that it would drop below 100 million very soon. However, by then, the remaining people would be the true powerhouses. By then, they would have to rely on their own skills and luck. Whoever could last until the end would become a disciple of the Sun Sect. Muronyu put the jade slip into the Hichu Luo Shu and then slowly flew forward. During this process, he had already extended his spiritual force to the extreme. He wasn't afraid of encountering any cultivators. Among the 100 billion people, he wasn't afraid of anyone. No one could threaten him. However, there were too many beasts here. If it was a low-level bright world realm beast, Muronyu could still kill it. However, he wouldn't be a match for higher-level beasts. If he accidentally encountered a blessed realm ferocious beast, then he could only run. Whatever he thought of would appear. At this moment, a terrifying aura that made even Muronyu's soul tremble shot over from afar. Muronyu's expression changed drastically. He immediately entered the Hichu Luo Shu without hesitation. He too and Luo Shu also quickly transformed into a tiny particle that was invisible to the naked eye and fell to the ground, mixing with the dust. Boom! Even so, when the incomparably terrifying aura swept past the He-Tu and the Book of the Luo, Muronyu's entire body and even his soul felt a sharp pain. It was as if someone had ruthlessly whipped him, and his soul was on the verge of shattering. Fortunately, that terrifying aura only swept past and didn't discover the Hichu, Luoshu, or Muronyu. Otherwise, Muronyu would definitely die. It's definitely the creation realm beast's spiritual force. Muronyu thought with a pale face in the Hichu Luoshu. Although that terrifying spiritual force had already swept past, he still didn't come out. If that beast came back and attacked, it would be a tragedy. At the same time, Muronyu realized that the light in the jade slip was flashing at a terrifying rate. In other words, many unlucky people had already been crushed into powder by that terrifying spiritual force. Poor kid. Muronyu's expression was ugly. He had thought that it would be easy for him to stay in the last 10,000 on Planet 4 elements, but now he was feeling a little pressured. If I can advance to the Bright World realm, my chances of survival will be much higher. Plus, it's very likely that the Solar Sect is doing this because of this round star core. I have the Hichu Luoshu, so it's not like I don't have the ability to snatch this star core. Muronyu thought to himself. In the end, He gritted his teeth and flipped his hand. The star core that he had obtained from young Master Yun appeared in his hand. Chapter 1911. Murong Yu planned to refine the star core. Originally, he planned to refine this part of the star core when he reached the half step to the creation realm. That would be the best time to refine the star core and break through to the creation realm in one fell swoop. However, Murong Yu had no other choice now. If his strength was still at rank 3 chaotic space realm, he would not be able to persevere to the last 10,000 places. Even if he could persevere, he would probably be shattered into pieces by the aftermath of the various experts' attacks. Only by becoming stronger could he protect himself and compete for the star core in the following period of time. Looking at the dark star core, Murong Yu's expression gradually calmed down. After a while, he entered a state of cultivation. He did not choose to refine the star core directly with the chaos furnace. That was because he would only obtain a large amount of pure power. That power might allow him to break through to the bright world realm directly, but he would not be able to obtain anything else. The most precious thing about the star core was not the power it contained, but the various things it contained from the birth, growth, peak, and destruction of a planet. Swoosh! With a single thought from Murong Yu, the star core in his hand surged with an enormous amount of energy, crazily gushing into his body like a torrent. At that moment, Murong Yu's power began to soar crazily. After a while, he had already reached the peak of rank 3 chaotic space realm. At that moment, there were basically no changes to the star core. However, Murong Yu's attention was not on the increase of his power. That was because it was already within his expectations. At that moment, all his attention was placed on his mind. At that moment, an extremely magnificent and shocking scene appeared in his mind. His entire mind was filled with darkness and chaos. There was only endless primal chaos. Apart from that, there was nothing else. After an indeterminate amount of time, an inconspicuous object was suddenly nurtured by the endless chaos. It was a speck of dust. Time passed slowly, and the speck of dust grew bigger and bigger. After an unknown period of time, it gradually grew to the size of a boulder and continued to grow until it finally grew to the size of a planet. In the end, the planet stopped growing. He was afraid that it had already reached the limit of its growth because this particle had already become an incomparably huge origin star. However, it was wrong to say that it was an origin star at this time. This was because there was nothing on this huge sphere. It was just an incomparably huge particle. Time continued to pass quickly. Gradually, the huge sphere began to change. The sphere gradually loosened up, and then some particles gradually formed. The particles began to combine freely. Some eventually turned into soil, while others turned into boulders. Can one control the fate of chaos? Can one be above the endless chaos? Only by controlling chaos can one control the endless chaos. Whoever I want to be immortal can be immortal and indestructible. Whoever I want to annihilate can be integrated into chaos again and cannot become an independent life. Yes, this is the true essence of the chaos controller. To control chaos and be above chaos. At this moment, Murong Yu finally understood the true essence of the chaos controller. It turned out that the chaos controller did not want to integrate chaos, but to be above chaos. However, although Murong Yu understood this principle, it was impossible for him to become the chaos controller directly. This was because even if he understood the principle, how could he control chaos if he did not have powerful strength? It was like a kid who understood how to kill a beast, but did he have the ability to kill the beast? Only by understanding the principle and having absolute strength would he be able to do it. However, after understanding this principle, Murong Yu would be able to control chaos easily as long as his strength reached a certain level in the future. Otherwise, without these comprehensions, he would not be able to become the chaos controller even if he had enough strength. At the same time, in addition to these comprehensions, Murong Yu also gained a lot. Life and death, even creation. Hichu had once said what the difference was between the creation realm, the bright world realm, and the chaotic realm. The chaotic realm could comprehend the law of space, and after reaching the bright world realm, one could comprehend the law of time. However, the creation realm could create things out of nothing, dead things or even living things. It was not impossible to create all kinds of life forms. Murong Yu believed that as long as he accumulated enough, he could reach the creation realm now. He did not have the lack of comprehension like other half-step creation realm experts. He slowly opened his eyes and recovered from the state of comprehension. The comprehensions he had obtained from the star core had been deeply engraved in his memory. As long as he did not die, those comprehensions would not disappear. I've reached the peak of the chaotic realm. After waking up, Murong Yu immediately checked his cultivation. This check gave him a shock. Although it seemed like an extremely long time had passed since he had seen the birth and destruction of an origin star. However, in reality, it had only been a few moments. In a few moments, his realm had already broken through from rank 3 to rank 9 of the chaotic space realm. If others found out, it would definitely scare a large number of cultivators to death. Should I continue to improve? Murong Yu glanced at the star core in his hand. A part of the star core had been consumed, but the remaining power was definitely enough for him to break through to the bright world realm. During the first selection, I was only at rank 3 of the chaotic space realm. If I were to improve by a few small realms and even reach rank 9 of the chaotic space realm, although it would be shocking, it would still be within an acceptable range. However, if I were to break through to the bright world realm, it would be too shocking. Although I have the ability to hide my realm, who knows if the creation realm experts can see through it? If they find out, I'll definitely be miserable. With that thought, Murong Yu put away the star core and decided not to continue improving his realm. Otherwise, he had a hunch that what awaited him would definitely be a great tragedy. Although Murong Yu had stopped increasing his strength, he didn't immediately leave the He 2 and the Book of Luo. Instead, he stayed in the He 2 and the Book of Luo to consolidate his current realm and recultivate all the combat skills he had cultivated in the past. The power of the 9 syllables mantra and various other combat skills continued to increase as his strength continued to increase. However, many of the combat skills were no longer suitable for Murong Yu now. Even if he used those combat skills, they would still have the same power as Murong Yu's direct punch. Moreover, Murong Yu did not know what level the 9 syllables mantra belonged to in the endless starry sky. However, he had a hunch that the 9 syllables mantra was an extremely high-level cultivation technique in the endless starry sky. He definitely could not be recognized by others, or he would definitely be in trouble. It's also time to look for some high-level combat skills. I heard that there are many orthodoxies and inheritances in this 4-yuan planet. Why don't I take this opportunity to look for some powerful combat skills? Murong Yu pondered and used the 9 syllables mantra to suppress his realm to rank 5 of the chaotic space realm before leaving Hichu Luo Shu. This realm was 2 small realms higher than his previous rank 3 of the chaotic space realm. However, his true combat strength could even kill high-level ferocious beasts. Hiding his true combat strength was definitely not because Murong Yu wanted to keep a low profile, but because it was suitable for him to pretend to be weak. It was also one of the important means to survive on the dangerous 4-yuan planet. Chapter 19:12. The Chi of Death was getting denser and denser. Correspondingly, the Chi of Heaven and Earth was getting thinner and thinner. It had only been a few days since Murong Yu had entered Hichu Luo Shu. However, the Chi of Heaven and Earth was already equivalent to the Chi of Heaven and Earth of 2 stars. It should be known that a few days ago, the Heaven-Earth Yuan Chi of the 4-yuan star was much stronger than the 3-yuan star, even though it didn't match the status of the 4-yuan star. Under such circumstances, the aging of the people on 4-element star was probably accelerating. Murong Yu estimated that if this situation continued, it wouldn't take more than 10 years for Planet Tun to be completely destroyed. Perhaps it would only take 5 or 6 years. Level 9 Chaotic Space Realm. Comparable to a high-level Bright World Realm expert. Muronyu estimated his strength after killing a level 6 Bright World Realm beast with a single punch. With his strength, he should be able to kill level 7 or even level 8 Bright World Realm beasts. However, he had not encountered any beasts of a higher level, so he did not know his exact strength. However, if it was a half step to the creation realm, Muronyu estimated that he would not be a match for it. My current strength is enough to roam the galaxy. Although my speed is not fast, at least I won't be destroyed by the 4-element star. Muronyu thought to himself. He had already prepared a way out. Perhaps it was because he was too far away from the Sky Martial world, but Muronyu could feel that Hichu Luoshu had a connection with the teleportation points in the Sky Martial world. However, the connection was very weak. It was almost faintly discernible. He did not dare to teleport over in such a state. It would be a tragedy if he did not teleport over and charged into the turbulent space. The turbulent space in the endless galaxy was not something the turbulent space in the sacred world could compare to. Even if a creation realm expert entered the turbulent space, he would be killed by the terrifying spatial turbulence. Moreover, the turbulent space in the endless galaxy was as vast and boundless as the endless galaxy. Once one charged in, one could forget about coming out. Therefore, Muronyu's only way out was to leave 4-element star and charge into the endless galaxy. Of course, perhaps he didn't need to do so. The experts of the solar sect might even save them. However, Muronyu would never put his life in the hands of others. Moreover, he felt that the solar sect had sent them here for a scheme. Blazing Dojo. A smile suddenly appeared on Muronyu's face. The Burning Flame Dojo was a dojo left behind by a creation realm expert when he was alive. Legend had it that the Burning Flame Dojo was a peak creation realm expert when he was alive. He was one of the top experts before the 4-yuan star declined. Most importantly, Fenhuo was a rogue cultivator when he was alive. His dojo was his cave abode for cultivation. His dojo contained his inheritance and even the treasures he had collected throughout his life. These were all information that Muronyu had extracted from the memories of the vicious beast that he had killed. In fact, anyone who entered the Burning Dojo knew about it. However, there were not many people who knew the exact location of the Burning Flame Dojo. Muronyu was very lucky. The vicious beast that he had casually killed had the location of the Burning Flame Dojo. This ferocious beast had grown from a Chaos Realm ferocious beast to a Bright World Realm level 6 ferocious beast after accidentally stepping into the Burning Fire Dojo. Muronyu immediately unfolded his body and flew towards the Blazing Dojo. The Burning Flame Dojo was not in the center of the 4-yuan star, but near the edge of the center. There were no Creation Realm vicious beasts there, but there were a few vicious half-step to Creation Realm vicious beasts in the surroundings. Therefore, Muronyu concealed himself and quickly and carefully rushed over. With his current strength, his concealment ability had become even more powerful. No one below the Creation Realm could discover his tracks. However, by the time Muronyu arrived at the Inferno Training Hall, there were already quite a few people gathered outside. There were at least 1,000 of them. All of them were level 9 Chaos Realm cultivators. They should be the cultivators that the Solar Sect had sent here. In addition to them, there were many vicious beasts. Now, both sides were confronting each other. However, it was obvious that although there were fewer vicious beasts than cultivators, one of them had reached the half-step to Creation Realm. In terms of strength, the vicious beasts were definitely stronger than the cultivators. However, both sides were just confronting each other and did not fight. Both sides' attention was on a bottomless cave. At that moment, the cave was emitting rays of light that shot into the sky. Muronyu frowned slightly. That cave was the passage to the Burning Flame Dojo. Muronyu was also very clear about the rays of light that were emitted. From the vicious beast memory, he knew that there were a few terrifying Creation Realm vicious beasts that had entered and discovered the Burning Flame Dojo. Back then, the few Creation Realm vicious beasts had intimidated the other experts and forced their way into the cave. However, just as they had rushed in, the cave erupted with rays of light. Then, The ferocious beasts in the blessed realm melted before they could even react. He couldn't be any more dead. These seemingly harmless rays of light could even easily melt a creation realm expert. After taking a closer look, Murongyu's face suddenly revealed a look of horror. That was because he realized that these rays of light were not rays of light, but flames. Burning flame, burning flame. Could this be one of the flames left behind by burning flame? That expert specialized in the cultivation of fire? Morongyu was aghast. He did not show himself, but remained invisible and hovered in the sky. What he was worried about now was whether these flames would attract the attention of the creation realm vicious beasts and cultivators. Once those people came over to interfere, it would be a tragedy. However, Murongyu's worries were obviously unnecessary. The flames lasted for more than 10 days. Although more vicious beasts and cultivators came over, the creation realm expert still did not appear. Perhaps the creation realm expert had hidden himself like him and was just not discovered by him. On this day, the flames that erupted from the cave finally disappeared. Roar! Before Murong-you could react, a ferocious beast with a half-step in a blessed realm roared and charged in first. Then, the other vicious beasts and cultivators also rushed in quickly. Murong-you was not in a hurry because he knew that after these flames disappeared, they would erupt again after a period of time. However, the Burning Flame Dojo was also full of danger, and it was not easy to enter, let alone obtain the inheritance and various treasures of the Burning Flame. Murongyu was almost the last to enter. Swoosh! However, he felt an incomparably powerful, devouring force acting on his body, pulling him straight down. In fact, before Murongyu could react, he had already landed on the ground again. In fact, Murongyu had already known this scene from the vicious beast's memory, so he did not panic. Boom! However, just as he landed on the ground, an extremely powerful pressure pressed down on him from all directions. Poof! After a muffled sound, Murongyu had already come out of the void and could no longer remain invisible. Murongyu was shocked and was about to turn invisible again. However, what made him speechless was that after he turned invisible, an extremely terrifying pressure quickly blasted over and directly shattered the effect of his invisibility. After thinking about it, Murongyu decided not to turn invisible. Now, as long as he was not up against those half-step to the creation realm vicious beasts, he was invincible. Even if he was up against those half-step to the creation realm vicious beasts, he could still escape. What appeared in front of him was a long and extremely huge passage. Murongyu immediately unfolded his body and shot into the depths of the passage. At this moment, there were no more people or vicious beasts in front of him. The passage was not very long, and he soon reached the end. At the end was a huge room with a radius of 1,000 miles. At this moment, the vicious beasts and cultivators that Murongyu had seen outside were all gathered here. Whoosh! When they saw Murongyu enter, all the vicious beasts and cultivators looked over. However, when they saw that Murongyu was a cultivator, the vicious beasts quickly retracted their gazes. As for the cultivators, most of them also retracted their gazes. A considerable number of them were filled with shock and disdain. They were shocked that Murongyu, a mere rank 5 chaotic space realm cultivator, would appear on Foryuan planet. They were naturally disdainful because they had seen Murongyu's cultivation level. However, there were still a few people who were sizing up Murongyu. Their gazes were filled with curiosity. However, no one stepped forward to greet Murongyu. Murongyu glanced at these people indifferently and realized that they were all in small groups of 3 to 5. He didn't say anything. Instead, he slowly walked forward. At the back of the room, there were 5 passages. Each of the passages was spewing the flames that had been spewed out from the cave outside. However, only 4 of the 5 passages had flames that were real. Only one of the passages had flames that were fake. It was now a test of the person's ability to make a choice. If he made the right choice, he would be able to enter the Burning Fire Dojo. If he made the wrong choice, he would die. Brother, please wait a moment. At that moment, a voice was heard. Murongyu stopped in his tracks and looked in the direction of the voice. He saw a handsome young man striding over with a smile on his face. "What's the matter?" Murong Yu was a little stunned. This guy was the first person to greet him. Behind him was a team of about 100 people. They were considered strong. "I am Lu Wenyang. I would like to invite you to join my team. How about it? Of course, we will distribute according to our efforts. If we obtain it ourselves, it will belong to us. If the team obtains it together, we will distribute it according to the amount of effort we put in," Lu Wenyang said to Murong Yu with a bright smile. Upon hearing Lu Wenyang's words, Murong Yu was stunned. However, the faces of the people behind Lu Wenyang darkened. They did not understand why Lu Wenyang would invite Murong Yu, a good-for-nothing. He was only a rank 5 chaotic space realm cultivator. Wouldn't he be dragging them down if he were to join their team? However, Lu Wenyang was the strongest person among them. He was also the #1 chaotic space realm cultivator in the Yuan planet. Hence, they could not say anything. Chapter 19:13. Murong Yu's eyes lit up as he looked at Lu Wenyang. Those who could be selected for the first time in the Sun Sect were all elites and geniuses. However, there are also differences between geniuses. Most people only saw his strength as a level 5 chaotic space realm and immediately looked at him with disdain. Little did they know that if he really only had the strength of a level 5 chaotic space realm, how could he stand out? Was he the only chaotic space realm on the origin planet he was on? However, Lu Wenyang obviously thought highly of him. Even if he did not know his strength, he felt that he was definitely not simple. The lower the realm, the more terrifying the combat power. If Murong Yu grew to the same realm as him, how powerful would he be? Therefore, Lu Wenyang did not dare to underestimate Murong Yu at all. Therefore, when everyone else was disdainful of Murong Yu, he extended an olive branch to Murong Yu. "Brother Lu, I'm used to being alone. I don't like to join a team." Lu Wenyang smiled. Murong Yu also smiled and refused. Hearing Murong Yu's words, Lu Wenyang's smile froze, and a look of displeasure flashed across his eyes. However, he quickly continued to smile. "It's okay. In that case, I won't disturb you." As he spoke, Lu Wenyang walked back. What the hell? He's just a level 5 chaotic space realm. Does he think he's a level 5 bright world realm? He actually rejected senior brother Lu's invitation. He's really shameless. Senior brother Lu invited him because he pitied him. Who's he think he is? The people in Lu Wenyang's team were originally gloomy, but after seeing Murong Yu reject Lu Wenyang, all of them were filled with righteous indignation. Some of them were even eager to come over and teach Murong Yu a lesson. Murong Yu glanced at those people indifferently, his eyes full of disdain. These people might not be angry at him for rejecting Lu Wenyang. On the contrary, they wished that he could reject Lu Wenyang. That way, he would not be a burden to them. They were only doing this to flatter Lu Wenyang. After Lu Wenyang returned, no one knew what he said, but those people all quieted down. He didn't even look at Murong Yu. Sensing Murong Yu's gaze, Lu Wenyang smiled and nodded at Murong Yu. Murong Yu inwardly raised his guard. Lu Wenyang was simply too calm. How could he not be angry at all? There were only two possibilities for such a person. One was that he was really magnanimous. The other was a fake smile that didn't reach his eyes. Even though he was furious, he didn't show it on his face. This kind of person was the most terrifying. It was also this kind of person who would stab someone in the back. Therefore, Murong Yu was a little wary of this Lu Wenyang. However, the two of them were at the same level. If Lu Wenyang dared to stab Murong Yu in the back, Murong Yu would definitely die. Murong Yu definitely wouldn't mind slapping him to death. Therefore, Murong Yu ignored Lu Wenyang and the others and walked straight towards the 5 tunnels. Soon, he arrived at the front of the tunnel. Is this idiot going to rush in directly? Seeing Murong Yu's appearance, the people and beasts in the room had the same thought. Who didn't know how terrifying these flames were? Murong Yu didn't rush in immediately. Although he had the memories of the beast only entered because it was lucky. At that time, the beast rushed in from the most central tunnel. Therefore, Murong Yu's gaze was focused on the passage in the middle. After a long time, he still didn't find anything. Then, he looked at the other 4 tunnels. After a long time, Yu finally found something. The 5 tunnels looked exactly the same. There was almost no difference. However, under Yu's observation, he found that they weren't really different. One of the tunnels wasn't very dangerous for Yu. Moreover, the flames in this tunnel looked the same as the other 4 tunnels, but it was a little brighter than the other 4 tunnels. However, these differences weren't fixed. Almost every moment, the 5 passageways would switch with each other. For example, the flames that didn't give Yu a strong sense of danger and were obviously brighter were originally in the middle tunnel. However, in the next moment, they appeared on the tunnel on the right. They changed back and forth between the 5 tunnels and didn't stay in the same place for more than a moment. This brighter flame should be fake. However, even so, I need to seize the opportunity. Otherwise, I'll accidentally rush into the real flame. Yu observed for a while and muttered to himself. Whoosh! After a while, Yu's body swayed, then turned into a stream of light and rushed into the middle tunnel. However, Yu still took out the Hichu Luoshu and various other treasures. If his estimation was wrong, it would be a tragedy. Everyone saw a blur, and Yu disappeared on the spot. He's already gone into the tunnel. The next moment, the crowd and the beasts were in an uproar. This was because they all saw that Yu had successfully passed through the flames and entered the tunnel behind. Whoosh! 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 Immediately, without any hesitation, many cultivators and ferocious beasts rushed toward the central passage. However, waves of screams were heard. None of the cultivators and beasts who flew over could pass through the flames and rush into the tunnel behind. Instead, they were all swallowed by the flames. The tragic end of these people immediately stopped Yu and the others who were ready to make a move. Some of the cultivators and beasts looked at the flames with lingering fear. Fortunately, they were a beat slower, otherwise they would be the ones who died. How did that kid get in? Everyone looked at each other. It could be said that before Yu, they had been studying these 5 tunnels. However, they did not gain anything. Behind them, Lu Wenyang, who had been smiling, looked a little gloomy. His teammates, on the other hand, were all looking gloomy. At this time, they were quite regretful. If Yu had joined their team, they might have already entered the tunnel. That little bastard must have found a way to enter the tunnel long ago. That's why he rejected senior brother Lu's invitation, a young man said hatefully. That must be it. That little bastard, if I see him again, I'll definitely kill him, someone echoed. These people were really ridiculous. Originally, when Lu Wenyang tried to rope in Yu, they were not willing. Now that Yu had found a way to enter, they resented Yu. In fact, what did Yu have to do with them? Hearing the words of the team members, Lu Wenyang's face also darkened. His eyes flickered, and no one knew what he was thinking. Hearing the continuous shrill screams coming from behind, Yu, who had already entered the tunnel, sneered. If he did not have the memory of that beast, he would not have discovered the trick of the 5 tunnels so early. If those people and beasts wanted to rush in, it would take at least a few days for them to do so. Of course, if there were people rushing in continuously, there should be people who would coincidentally enter the tunnel. However, would those people and beasts dare to risk their lives? Absolutely not. However, Yu did not slow down. Instead, he continued to move forward. Soon, he found that there were 2 tunnels on both sides of his tunnel. It should be the other 4 tunnels. Sure enough, different routes lead to the same destination. After the 5 tunnels merged, the tunnel continued to spread forward. However, with Yu's speed, he soon appeared in another stone room. This stone room was not very big, only about 100 miles in radius. In the middle of the stone room, there was a deep pool. Buzz! When he saw the deep pool, Yu's soul could not help but tremble. Not because he was afraid, but because he was excited. The deep pool was about 50 miles in radius, and he did not know how deep it was. The deep pool was slowly filled with water. When Yu saw the pool water, he could not help but be shocked. The pool water was not anyone's, but soul power. the entire pool of soul power. It was sealed by the formation and could not escape. Of course, this deep pool was not worth mentioning compared to Murong Yu's boundless soul sea. However, the soul power in this pool was much stronger than his soul power. Under the same unit, 1 unit of soul power in the pool water was equivalent to 100 million units of Murong Yu's soul power. In other words, the soul power in this deep pool was at least 100 million times stronger than Murong Yu's soul power. This was very terrifying. Could it be that this venerable burning flame is also a soul cultivator? Murong Yu thought in his heart, but he had already taken a step forward. In the next moment, he had already rushed into the pool water. Spirit devour. At the start, Murong Yu did not immediately devour the soul power, but carefully checked it. When he discovered that the soul power was all pure soul power, he then completely opened up the soul space. As Murong Yu used Soul Devour, the soul force in the pool was swallowed up by Murong Yu's soul like a stormy sea into his soul space. Murong Yu's soul was rapidly growing at a speed visible to the naked eye. Originally, his soul was only at the 9-star level, which was equivalent to a sector lord, and the gap between it and his current cultivation level was getting bigger and bigger. But now, after a few devours, his soul had already grown to the pinnacle of the 9-star level. Under Murong Yu's active cultivation, the soul's word manically circulated. Under his devouring, the soul power in the pool was decreasing at a speed visible to the naked eye. As Murong Yu devoured more and more soul power, the soul sea in his soul space began to slowly solidify. In the end, his soul sea solidified into an incomparably huge solid. Rumble. On this day, this incomparably huge solid object suddenly exploded into pieces. Chapter 19:14. After an earth-shattering sound, the sea of soul, which had turned into a huge solid body, directly exploded. Instantly, Murong Yu's entire sea of soul became empty. There was nothing left, including the power of the soul. Instead, it turned into chaos. I wonder what will happen after the sea of soul disappears and explodes. Murong Yu guessed with anticipation. Because he didn't have any inheritance, Murong Yu didn't know what would happen to the soul after reaching the rebirth state. But he knew that there would definitely be an earth-shattering change from a 9-star soul to a rebirth state soul. Sure enough, before Murong Yu could finish his thought, a black dot appeared in his soul amidst the endless primal chaos. Then, a large amount of soul power appeared in the sea of soul. That small black dot was like a black hole, swallowing the soul power crazily. As the small black dot swallowed more and more soul power, the small black dot became bigger and bigger. Gradually, it became the shape of a planet. Murong Yu was shocked. Wasn't this the birth of a planet? Was this the transformation of the soul after reaching the rebirth state? Although he was shocked, Murong Yu didn't stop swallowing the soul power. Therefore, the small black dot became bigger and bigger. Finally, it became a huge sphere. Yuan star. However, this Yuan star was different from a real Yuan star. It was just a sphere formed by the condensation of soul power. There wasn't any chi of heaven and earth, soil, huge rocks, etc. It was only the size of a 1 Yuan star. At this moment, Murong Yu finally stopped swallowing the soul power. There were 2 reasons for this. One reason was that the sphere had reached its limit. If he continued swallowing the soul power, it wouldn't grow anymore. The other reason was that the pool of soul power outside had completely disappeared. It had all been swallowed by Murong Yu. At this moment, Murong Yu felt that his soul had stabilized at the peak of the rebirth state. Although the soul realm and cultivation realm corresponded, it was only a huge realm. Just like the 9-star soul corresponded to the sector lord. 9 stars only had 1 realm, but sector lords are divided into at least 9 small realms. So, it didn't take long for his soul to reach the peak of the rebirth realm, and it didn't reach the 1st, 2nd, or 3rd ranks. At this moment, the incomparably huge soul sphere was slowly rotating within Murong Yu's soul space. Waves of soul force that were thousands of times stronger than before were continuously emitted from the soul sphere, covering the entire soul space. Like a miniature version of Murong Yu, his soul sat cross-legged on top of the huge sphere, constantly absorbing and spitting out spiritual energy as he cultivated. With a thought, Murong Yu's soul power burst out from the sphere like stormy waves, providing him with the power to fight against the enemy. As the soul sphere spun, not only would it absorb and spit out large amounts of soul energy, but would also absorb and spit out large amounts of soul energy. It would also produce an inexplicable suction. This suction not only acted on Murong Yu's soul space, but also passed through Murong Yu's physical body and acted on the surrounding space, swallowing the spiritual energy drifting between heaven and earth, strengthening Murong Yu's soul power. Now, at every moment, even if Murong Yu didn't actively cultivate, the soul sphere would still devour a large amount of spiritual energy, just like the tree of life. Right now, Murong Yu's spiritual strength had reached an almost limitless state. I wonder what kind of changes will happen to the soul sphere after reaching the chaotic realm. Will it continue to grow and reach the 2-star level, or will it condense a new sphere? If that's the case, will the soul space become an endless starry sky in the end? And will there be as many soul spheres as there are sand in the endless starry sky? Murong Yu pondered in his heart, looking forward to it very much. He even wanted to immediately break through to the chaotic realm to verify his thoughts. However, it was a pity that there was no more spiritual energy for him to devour. However, after entering this place, his soul had broken through and reached the peak of the rebirth realm. Even if there were no more gains, Murong Yu was satisfied. Moreover, now that his soul had broken through, his strength had skyrocketed again. With the combination of his soul power, physical body, and cultivation, Murong Yu was confident that he could even fight a half-step to the creation realm cultivator or ferocious beast for 300 rounds. It's already been a few days. The people behind me should have noticed something fishy about the 5 passageways. I have to hurry and go deeper. Murong Yu glanced at the passageway behind him, then extended his body and shot deeper into the passageway. Not long after he left, a group of more than 10 people flew in. When they saw the empty, deep pool, their faces turned ashen. They weren't fools. How could they not know that the deep pool definitely contained some treasures? However, they had all been taken away by Murong Yu. Although everyone was furious, they did not stop. Instead, they continued to fly forward. They would only gain something if they rushed ahead of Murong Yu. Otherwise, all the benefits would be taken away by Murong Yu. At this moment, Murong Yu had arrived in front of a natural chasm and was once again faced with a choice. There was only one passageway, but this passageway was cut in half by a natural chasm. The natural chasm was bottomless and not very wide. It was about 1,000,000 miles wide. At this moment, huge rocks floated above the natural chasm. These huge rocks connected to form small paths that led to the passageway behind. It was obvious that as long as one passed through these small paths, they would reach the other side. Moreover, there were as many as 10,000 of these small paths formed by floating huge rocks. One could choose from them. Murong Yu didn't immediately make a choice and step onto these floating paths. Even a fool would know that these small paths were not simple. If he rushed up rashly, the consequences would be disastrous. After observing for a while, Murong Yu had a thought. In the next moment, an avatar formed from energy appeared beside him. Go! Murong Yu controlled the energy clone and rushed onto one of the small paths. 1 huge rock, 2 huge rocks, 3 huge rocks. The energy clone jumped over 10 huge rocks in a row without encountering any danger. Am I overthinking? Murong Yu was a little puzzled. However, at this moment, Murong Yu's hair stood on end, and a sense of danger shrouded his heart. Whoosh! An inexplicable gust of wind suddenly blew, and the energy clone that was jumping out was blown by the gust of wind before it could even react. After that, There was no more after that. Not even a trace of the energy clone was left. The gust of wind appeared very suddenly. Not to mention the energy clone, even the original body wouldn't be able to avoid it. Even if the original body went up, the end result would be the same as the energy clone. Moronyu narrowed his eyes slightly. With a thought, tens of thousands of energy clones appeared beside him. Even if all these energy clones were to fall, it wouldn't affect Moronyu much. At most, it would only cause him to lose some energy. With the Tree of Life, this loss of energy wasn't worth mentioning. Whoosh! All the energy clones rushed onto all the small paths and started sprinting with all their might. Some of the energy clones encountered the gust of wind as soon as they stepped onto the small paths and were annihilated without even having time to react. Some of them continued to charge forward for tens of thousands of kilometers before the huge rocks they stepped on suddenly cracked, and the energy clones fell into the chasm below. They couldn't fly. The energy clones fell to their deaths. Some of them encountered terrifying flames on the way and were directly burned to death. Or purple lightning would suddenly descend from the heavens and strike the incarnation to death. Anything that could be imagined. All kinds of unimaginable phenomena would appear, and every small path would appear. Fly directly? It was impossible to fly at all. Jump directly over? What a joke! How could it be possible to fly over? The only way was to walk through these 10,000 small paths. Other methods wouldn't work at all. The first stage should be the choice of 5 paths. The second stage should be the chasm here. This is definitely not a dead end. There should be a real path to the other side. There must be a way. Moronyu looked at the 10,000 small paths in the chasm and thought to himself. At this time, his 10,000 energy clones had all been killed. None of them could make it halfway, let alone reach the other side. I must have overlooked something or not noticed something. Moronyu thought to himself. Just as he was about to create tens of thousands of energy clones again, there was the sound of clothes rustling in the air behind him. Moronyu sighed and stopped creating tens of thousands of energy clones because he knew that the people behind him had finally caught up. Looking in the direction of the sound, sure enough, a group of more than 10 people were already closing in on him with murderous intent. Haha, you really are like this. Hand over all your treasures. A burly man looked at Moronyu and laughed loudly. At the same time, he had already reached out to grab Moronyu. Moronyu had yet to make a move. A person was faster than the burly man. No, it should be called a ferocious beast. Bang! Just as the burly man made his move, the ferocious beast at the half-step to manifestation stage had already viciously slapped the burly man's body with its claws, directly crushing his physical body and soul into powder. The burly man was only at Chaotic Space Realm Level 9 and did not even have the strength of a Bright World Realm. How could he be a match for a half-step to the Creation Realm Ferocious Beast? Previously, the Ferocious Beast and the Cultivator had only confronted each other without fighting. That was because there was no issue of benefits involved. Now, that Moronyu had a lot of treasures on him. How could the Ferocious Beast and the Cultivator remain calm? All of you get lost. This ant is mine. An ape-like ferocious beast's spiritual force spread out and vibrated. Muronyu's expression did not change, but the cultivator's expression changed. Of course, they were not worried about Muronyu's life or death, but they were worried that all the treasures on Muronyu would be snatched away by the ferocious beast. In that case, it would have nothing to do with them. What did Muronyu's life or death have to do with them? Chapter 1915. Ant, hand over all your treasures. The ape-like beast vibrated its divine force and slowly closed in on Moronyu. Moronyu frowned slightly. After his soul had broken through to the peak of the rebirth realm, he was no longer afraid of half-step to creation realm cultivators and beasts. But now, there was more than one ferocious beast at the half-step to blessed realm. Once the battle started, Moronyu would definitely not be their match if all the beasts attacked. In this small space, Moronyu had no choice but to escape. This was something Moronyu did not want to see. Muronyu separated a portion of his divine force to continue studying the small path formed by the floating boulders behind him. He looked coldly at the ape-like beast. "You want all my treasures?" The ape-like beast's eyes flashed with a terrifying light as it vibrated its divine force. "Nonsense! Hurry up and hand them over." A terrifying, murderous intent flashed across Murongyu's eyes, but a bright smile appeared on his face. At the same time, he flipped his hand, and a storage ring appeared in his palm. "This is my storage ring. I'll leave it to you now," Muronyu said calmly as he tossed the storage ring to the ape-like beast. The ape-like beast, the other beasts, and the cultivators were stunned. They did not expect Muronyu to be so straightforward. The other beast was especially regretful. If they had known, they would have attacked. Swoosh! However, they were not slow to act. A large furry hand reached out at lightning speed and grabbed the storage ring. However, the other beasts were not slow either. They all reached out with their large hands to grab the storage ring. "You're all courting death." The ape-like beast was enraged, and its divine force vibrated. At the same time, a terrifying aura erupted from its body and swept wildly towards the half-step to Creation Realm beasts. A great battle broke out in an instant. The terrifying aura continued to vibrate. Except for Muronyu, all the cultivators retreated with pale faces. Although they were all geniuses, they were only at level 9 of the chaotic space realm. There was still a gap between them and these ferocious beasts. They couldn't even withstand the shockwaves from the shockwaves. Therefore, he could only retreat. Muronyu also retreated, but this time he retreated to the side of the chasm. This is a formation. After a period of research, Muronyu finally discovered the mystery behind the chasm. The 10,000 paths and the surrounding environment formed a natural formation. Originally, any array formation would not have any effect on Muronyu. Muronyu only needed to directly cross it. However, the Heavenly Moat Chasm was very special. It was impossible to fly. Unable to fly, Muronyu could only rely on the floating rocks to cross the natural chasm. Otherwise, he would fall. Who knew what kind of terrifying things were waiting for him below? He might even fall to his death. That was where the problem lay. These floating stones were like array patterns, forming a large array. Of course, some array patterns could be passed through. However, it had to be the correct ones. Otherwise, if he stepped on the wrong one, he would trigger the array and be killed by the array. However, were those floating stones the correct ones? Although Muronyu had already seen through the operation of the array, he still couldn't pass through it. This made him depressed. However, time was tight now, so he still studied it. Could these huge rocks be the safe floating stones? Murongyu's eyes suddenly lit up. The floating stones were all the same size and looked similar. It was as if they were directly replicated. However, under Murongyu's observation, he still discovered some differences. The power radiating from individual floating stones was relatively dimmer. If not for Murongyu's focused observation, he would not have discovered it. Moreover, although the positions of these floating stones were constantly changing, they still formed an invisible path that vaguely led to the other side. Boom! At this moment, the battle between the half-step to manifestation ferocious beasts finally came to an end. As they fought, the storage ring that Muronyu casually threw out could no longer withstand the vibrations of their auras and exploded. There was nothing. The ferocious beasts were stunned at first, then they flew into a rage. "Ant, how dare you trick us?" The ferocious beasts finally reacted. They had been tricked by an ant. This was intolerable. Thus, they made their moves. Each and every one of them unleashed a frightening amount of power and grabbed at Muronyu. "Idiot!" Muronyu turned his head and sneered at the ferocious beasts. He then took a step forward and stepped on a floating stone in a flash. He only paused on this floating rock for a moment, then rose into the air again and landed on another floating rock not far away. Rumble. The huge hands of the ferocious beast did not stop and continued to grab at Muronyu with incomparable speed. However, just as they rushed into the natural chasm, gusts of wind, flames, purple lightning, and various other terrifying attacks appeared out of thin air. Before the ferocious beasts could react, their huge hands had already been annihilated. Such a terrifying attack immediately stopped the ferocious beasts and cultivators who wanted to rush in. It's too terrifying. The ferocious beasts and cultivators' faces were somewhat pale. They looked at Murong Yu, who was jumping on the floating stones with lingering fear. Murong Yu continued to jump on the huge rocks. His movements were very irregular, as if he was jumping randomly. However, what shocked the ferocious beasts and cultivators was that Murong Yu did not suffer any of those inexplicable attacks. Does this guy know how to cross the natural chasm? Are the floating stones under his feet a safe passage? The cultivators present were all geniuses. They quickly began to remember the floating stones that Murong Yu had stepped on before. If Murong Yu knew what they were thinking, he would definitely sneer in disdain. Although he seemed to be randomly jumping on these floating stones, these huge rocks were the ones that were dimmed by the power radiance. Most importantly, the positions of these floating stones were constantly changing. If one did not see the power radiance like him, one would not be able to distinguish the difference between these floating stones and other floating stones. Therefore, as long as one stepped on the wrong floating stone, this formation would be triggered. At that time, even a half step to the creation realm expert would be killed. However, even so, Murong Yu had already summoned the Hichu Luo Shu. Once he felt that something was wrong, he would immediately enter the Hichu Luo Shu and directly teleport away. Although he still had the chance to Phoenix his nirvana, he did not want to waste such a precious opportunity. Moreover, once he died, he would be resurrected at the place where he died. Therefore, once he was resurrected, this formation would immediately be triggered and he would die again. However, in the end, Murong Yu still managed to step onto the opposite shore. During this process, Murong Yu almost stepped on the wrong floating stones several times. He was so scared that he broke out in cold sweat. However, in the end, he still managed to pass through. Phew! After stepping on solid ground again, Murong Yu could not help but heave a sigh of relief. Then, he wanted to continue walking forward, but his body suddenly stopped and the muscles on his face stiffened. Challenger, congratulations on passing the second stage. There will be some rewards at the end of the passage. However, if you want to obtain my inheritance, you have to pass through the last stage. I'm really looking forward to it. An old voice suddenly rang in Murong Yu's ears. Murong Yu was shocked. This old voice should be Fanhua, the master of this training hall. However, this guy was not dead yet. Murong Yu was a little wary. However, since he had already reached this stage, he could only continue to walk forward. At the very least, he had to obtain the rewards left behind by Fanhua. Seeing Murong Yu quickly disappear on the other side, the people and beasts on the other side could not sit still. Whoosh! One of the cultivators immediately rushed towards a huge boulder. Then, his figure kept jumping and actually flew over the floating stones that Murong Yu had walked on. In a few breaths' time, this person had already crossed dozens of floating stones without triggering the formation. Seeing this, even more ferocious beasts and cultivators rushed forward. However, after dozens of people rushed up, the cultivator at the front stepped on a floating stone. Then, a purple heavenly lightning appeared above his head out of thin air. The cultivator didn't even have time to react before he was killed by the purple lightning, leaving not even a trace of him behind. In the end, he only left behind an incomparably shrill scream that reverberated in the world. Seeing this scene, the beasts and cultivators who rushed up to the floating stones were shocked. Some people had already quickly retreated. However, it was all too late. Strong winds, purple lightning, and terrifying flames all appeared out of thin air. Under the horrified gazes of those who did not step on the floating stones, these cultivators and beasts who rushed up the floating stones were directly blasted into flying ashes. Among them were 2 half-step to the manifestation realm beasts. What's going on? Everyone was puzzled. Murong Yu had clearly stepped on these floating stones, but did not trigger the formation. Why did they trigger it? Could it be that only one person was allowed to pass? Or could it only be done once? if it could not allow many people to pass at the same time, or if the passage could only be passed through once, everyone's expression was very ugly, and some people were even cursing Muronyu. Why did Muronyu get the upper hand every time? They only arrived after he had collected all the benefits? Did that kid have a way to enter and exit the Burning Flame Dojo? However, this was impossible. Could that guy's luck be shocking? Everyone pondered in their hearts and had no choice but to study the natural chasm again. This was because they knew that if they followed Murongyu's path, it would not work. At this moment, more people entered the first stage and arrived in front of the natural chasm. This included Lu Wenyang. However, Muronyu had already reached the end of the second stage, where a huge stone chamber appeared. Chapter 1916. The reward for passing the first stage is soul power. What's the reward for the second stage? Could it be a reward for the physical body? Muronyu muttered to himself as he stepped into the huge stone chamber. The huge stone chamber was empty. There was nothing except for the huge pool in the middle of the stone chamber. Another deep pool? Murongyu's heart skipped a beat as he looked over. Just like the reward for the first stage, this deep pool was also covered by various formations and restrictions. Inside the formation and restriction, there was a milky white liquid that was boiling. It wasn't soul power. He didn't know what it was. It just kept boiling and emitting wisps of white gas like boiling water. Although he didn't know what the milky white liquid was, Muronyu could sense the terrifying power coming from it. This is Chaos Origin Liquid. Hichu's surprised voice rang in Muronyu's ears. Ever since he evolved, Hichu had gained countless memories in his mind. Clearly, this so-called Chaos Origin Liquid was one of his extra memories. Chaos Origin Liquid? What's it used for? Muronyu couldn't help but ask. Chaos Origin Liquid is the supreme origin liquid used to temper the physical body in the endless starry sky. Usually, even a drop would cause a mad scramble, but there's an entire pool here. It can help your physical body break through to the creation realm, or even higher. We're rich. We're rich. Hichu explained excitedly. Muronyu was also excited. His eyes twinkled as he looked at the Chaos Origin Liquid. This milky white liquid was good stuff that even experts in the creation realm or above would covet. Without another word, Muronyu rushed over and sank into the deep pool. Gurgle, large amounts of Chaos Origin liquid flowed rapidly into Muronyu's body through the billions of pores on his body. Under the tempering of the Chaos Origin liquid, his physical body that had already reached the Chaos realm began to improve rapidly. As he grew stronger, he gradually approached the peak of the chaotic void realm. In the process of cultivation, Muronyu's heart stirred. He was about to release Zhao Jiqing and the others from the Hichu Luoshu. Previously, because Zhao Jiqing and the others were not soul cultivators, Muronyu did not let them come out to absorb the spiritual force. However, things are different now. Zhao Jiqing and the others could also devour the Chaos Origin Liquid to improve their physical bodies. Their strength and physical bodies are too weak. If they appear here, they will immediately explode. At this stage, they can only refine and absorb it drop by drop. Otherwise, they won't be able to bear it. Hichu's voice once again sounded in Muronyu's mind, as if he knew what Muronyu was thinking. Muronyu nodded. Even he felt immense pressure when he was immersed in the primal chaos liquid, let alone Zhao Jiqing and the others. With a thought, the Hichu Luoshu opened, and a large amount of primal chaos origin liquid was sucked in. At the same time, Muronyu's spiritual force transformed into a clone that appeared beside Zhao Jiqing and the others. As soon as Muronyu appeared, Zhao Jiqing and the others looked at him with resentment. This made Muronyu feel a little guilty. One had to know that Zhao Jiqing and the others chose to endure the boredom in the Hichu Luoshu because they wanted to spend more time with Muronyu. However, although the Hichu Luoshu was always by Muronyu's side, Muronyu spent too little time in the Hichu Luoshu. In fact, because of the repeated encounters with powerful enemies, Muronyu did not even leave a single clone in the Hichu Luoshu. This was because he was afraid that Zhao Jiqing and the others would notice something was wrong and worry. He didn't want Zhao Jiqing and the others to worry. Smiling sheepishly, Muronyu roughly explained the solar sex test he was undergoing. Of course, he didn't mention any danger. You're saying these things can increase the level of the physical body. Kurlan immediately became excited. Their strength had always been weak, especially their physical bodies, which were extremely frail. They wanted to be as strong as Muronyu's body, but no matter how hard they cultivated, they couldn't reach that level. In fact, their physical bodies hadn't even reached the realm of a realm lord. Muronyu nodded and immediately took a drop of primal chaos origin liquid. He diluted it into 6 portions and gave it to Zhao Jiqing, the 5 girls, and the big black dog. This primal chaos origin liquid contains enormous power. You have to be careful, or your souls will explode. Muronyu warned them with a serious expression. He was afraid that the girls would rush in recklessly and refine the primal chaos origin liquid. That would be a tragedy. Everyone nodded and began to refine the primal chaos origin liquid. Muronyu's strand of consciousness didn't leave. Instead, it stayed by their side to supervise. He didn't want his beautiful wives to die from the primal chaos origin liquid. At the same time, Muronyu's true body also cultivated in the primal chaos origin liquid. As time passed, the primal chaos origin liquid dwindled. On the contrary, Muronyu's physical body grew stronger. Rumble. Right at this moment, a terrifying explosion erupted from a chasm. Streaks of terrifying power continued to descend from the sky. Under the bombardment of these forces, the floating rocks kept shattering. In the blink of an eye, billions of floating rocks disappeared without a trace. Cultivator ants, this is your end. Anyone who dares take a step forward will die. A ferocious beast, exuding a terrifying aura, glanced coolly at the cultivators. The cultivators paled instantly, and their souls couldn't help but tremble violently. It was because the ferocious beast looking at them was in the creation realm. Although they didn't know what level of creation realm it was. Even if it was only in the creation realm, it could easily kill them with a glance. However, to the cultivator's surprise, this ferocious beast was surprisingly easy to talk to. If it was in the past, these ferocious beasts would have killed them long ago. After all, cultivators and ferocious beasts would always be at odds. However, these ferocious beasts were rather friendly, which puzzled them. The chasm was forcefully broken by this creation realm ferocious beast. Now, everyone could directly fly over. Of course, only the ferocious beasts flew over. The cultivators didn't dare to take half a step into the lightning pool. They didn't dare to think that the creation realm ferocious beast was joking. At that moment, Muronyu, who was tempering his body, slowly opened his eyes. Peak Chaos Realm? Unfortunately, I can't break through to the Bright World Realm. Is it because my cultivation level is insufficient? Muronyu said regretfully. He remembered that when he was in the Holy World, his physical body was sometimes a level higher than his cultivation level. However, now that he was in the endless starry sky, he couldn't do it when he was in the Rebirth Realm. Of course, the Rebirth Realm mentioned here was not the Rebirth Realm below the Chaos Realm. The Rebirth Realm mentioned here was a major realm. There were several sub-realms below the Rebirth Realm. The Rebirth Realm, Chaos Realm, Universe Realm, and even Creation Realm were the same. Just like the Sage Realm and the Holy World, it was further divided into the Sage Realm, Great Sage Realm, Undying Realm, Indestructible Realm, and so on. All of a sudden, Muronyu felt an intense sense of danger rising in his heart. Muronyu was shocked. With a thought, he summoned the Heat 2 and the inscription of the Luo. Then, he devoured the majority of the remaining Chaos Origin liquid. Then, Muronyu turned into a stream of light and quickly rushed into the passage behind. After Muronyu disappeared, a large number of ferocious beasts rushed over. When they saw that there was only an empty pool left, many ferocious beasts roared angrily. Although they didn't know what kind of treasures there were, They knew that Murong must have already taken all of them when he rushed in before them. Thus, they sped up and chased after him. Swoosh! As soon as Murong stepped into the passage, the scenery before him changed as if he had stepped into a teleportation formation. In the next moment, he appeared in a huge hall. There was a portrait of an old man hanging at the back of the hall. Although the portrait was old, the old man exuded a powerful aura that looked down on the world. This old man must be Finhua. Murong glanced around the hall and discovered that there were a few small doors beside the hall. Origin Weapon Storehouse. Elixir Storehouse. Treasure Storehouse of Heaven and Earth. Every small door was engraved with these big words that made people feel excited. Clearly, there were treasure storehouses behind these small doors. Murong hesitated for a moment and didn't immediately open these small doors. This was because this was the third stage, and Finhua's voice had disappeared. It only appeared for a moment in the second stage and then disappeared. This gave Murong a very strange feeling. After checking and finding that there was nothing wrong, Murong gritted his teeth and finally opened the small door of the Origin Weapon Storehouse. Boom! A terrifying aura erupted from the Origin Weapon Storehouse like a stormy sea. The terrifying aura even caused Murong to retreat more than 10 steps before he could stabilize himself. Murong wasn't surprised. On the contrary, his face revealed a look of pleasant surprise. This was because the aura was emitted by many powerful Origin weapons. Raising his strength to the maximum, Murong quickly rushed into the Origin Weapon Storehouse. With just one look, Murong's heart couldn't help but start thumping. There were a large number of Creation Realm Origin weapons, at least thousands of them. In addition to the Creation Realm Origin weapons, there were also a large number of Bright World Realm Origin weapons. In fact, some of the Origin weapons emitted an aura that was even more terrifying than the Creation Realm Origin weapons. Were those Origin weapons that surpassed the Creation Realm? Suppressing the excitement in his heart, Murong directly took out the Hichu Luoshu and stored all the Origin weapons in the entire Origin Weapon Storehouse. Then, he kicked open the door of the Elixir Storehouse, the Elixir Storehouse, Heavenly Treasure Storehouse, and so on were all taken away by Murong. These things were the lifetime collection of the Burning Flame Ancestor. The worst was a high-level Bright World Realm Origin weapon, and most of them were Creation Realm Origin weapons. They were extremely useful to Murong. However, these were just external objects. What about the Burning Flame Ancestor's inheritance? Murong's main purpose in entering this place was to find some combat skills, but he didn't see any combat skills or inheritance skills at all. Whoosh! Whoosh! At this moment, ferocious beasts had already entered the hall. Chapter 1917. Swoosh! The moment the beasts entered, Murong's gaze landed on the beast at the front. It was an unknown beast that looked like a deer and a donkey. The reason Murong was looking at it wasn't because of its strange appearance, but because it gave him an extremely dangerous feeling. Beside this vicious beast were a few half-step to Manifestation Realm vicious beasts that Murong had seen outside. They were all staring at Murong with eyes that seemed to be spitting fire. However, none of them said a word. In fact, they seemed to be a little afraid of the vicious beast in the lead. A ferocious beast in the blessed realm. Murong's pupils abruptly shrank as he confirmed the vicious beast's cultivation. In fact, Murong had already seen the intense light on the beast's body the moment it was teleported in. Although there was still a huge gap between it and Elder Wong, it was about the same level as the blessed realm expert behind Elder Wong. That person was also in the blessed realm. Ant, hand over all your treasures, then kill yourself. The Manifestation Realm ferocious beast looked at Murong with disdain. Moreover, it spoke directly instead of using its divine thought to create a voice that sounded like it was speaking. Murong chuckled. What if I don't hand them over? Then you'll die. Before the Manifestation Realm ferocious beast could say anything, the other half-step Manifestation Realm ferocious beast's divine sense vibrated. At the same time, It took a step forward and swiped its claw at Muronyu. The manifestation realm vicious beast didn't stop Muronyu either. It just coldly stared at him. To them, it did not matter whether Muronyu had obtained the Burning Flame Ancestors' inheritance or not. That was because it was an inheritance between cultivators. Even if they obtained it, it would be useless and they would not be able to cultivate it. They only cared about various treasures. Elixirs and essence weapons were also very useful to beasts. You want me to die? You're not qualified. Murongyu's eyes emitted a frightening, killing intent. Not only did he not retreat, he even took a step forward and threw out a punch. He pushed his level 9 chaotic void realm strength to the limit, and his body tensed up as he unleashed his strongest battle prowess. At the same time, Murongyu's spiritual sphere began to spin rapidly, shooting out beams of incomparably powerful spiritual force. This soul power rushed out of Murongyu's soul space and condensed on Murongyu's fist. Boom! In the blink of an eye, the fist and the claw collided fiercely in the void, creating an earth-shattering sound. Thud! 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 Almost at the same time, Muronyu and the half-step Blessed Realm ferocious beast that had attacked retreated more than 10 steps. At first glance, the two of them were actually on par with each other. One had to know that Muronyu was only a level 5 chaotic space realm expert. These ferocious beasts could not see Murongyu's true cultivation level. Even the Blessed Realm ferocious beast could not see it. Therefore, when they saw this scene, their expressions changed. In fact, the remaining half-step manifestation realm ferocious beasts were even more restless. They wanted to pounce on Muronyu. Plop! However, before they could make a move, the half-step Blessed Realm ferocious beast that had been pushed back by Murongyu's punch stiffened and fell on its back. After it fell to the ground, it lost all signs of life. It was actually dead. Dead. Many of the ferocious beasts were shocked and did not know the reason. Even the Blessed Realm ferocious beast could not understand why the half-step Blessed Realm ferocious beast had suddenly died. Only Muronyu knew. When they had clashed just now, in terms of strength, he was about the same as the half-step Blessed Realm ferocious beast. However, at the same time, Murongyu's spiritual energy, which had been condensed on his fist, took the opportunity to rush into the ferocious beast's spiritual space. Although the ferocious beast's spiritual energy would grow stronger with its strength, how could it withstand the attack of a spiritual energy that had reached the peak of the rebirth state? Therefore, this ferocious beast's spiritual energy had been destroyed, and it could not be more dead. You're courting death. The Blessed Realm ferocious beast was enraged. After roaring loudly, it stretched out its large hand and directly grabbed at Muronyu. This human was simply too strange and gave it a sense of danger. It wanted to kill this human. Murongyu's expression changed slightly. He could easily kill a half-step Blessed Realm ferocious beast, but it did not mean that he could kill a Blessed Realm ferocious beast. The difference between a half-step Blessed Realm and a true Blessed Realm was at least 10,000 times. The current Muronyu could not compete with a Blessed Realm ferocious beast. Therefore, with a thought, he was about to enter Hichu Luo Shu. However, his expression quickly changed again. This was because he did not know when the space here had been sealed. He could not enter Hichu Luo Shu. It was definitely not the Blessed Realm ferocious beast's doing. This was because, relatively speaking, a ferocious beast's understanding of space, time, and even creation abilities were far inferior to a cultivator's. If this ferocious beast had done something, Muronyu would have at least sensed it. However, he could not sense anything now. Could it be? A possibility surfaced in Murongyu's mind. However, he did not have time to think too much because there was no time for him to think so much. He grabbed at the air with his large hand, and in the next moment, the weapon fragment had already appeared in his hand. Although he was still no match for the Blessed Realm ferocious beast, even after using the weapon fragment, Muronyu was definitely not a person who would sit and wait for death. Before he died, he wanted to fight to the end. However, before they could exchange blows, a sudden change occurred. Whoosh, whoosh. Whoosh! The space in the hall they were in suddenly distorted. Before they could react, numerous figures entered the hall, accompanied by cries of surprise, one after another. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of people appeared in the hall. All of them were cultivators. Some of them were people Moronyu had seen outside, but most of them were people he had never seen before. They must be latecomers. Seeing this, the Blessed Realm Ferocious Beast and Moronyu were stunned. In particular, Moronyu felt an extremely strong sense of danger rising from the bottom of his heart. Everything was too strange. It was obvious that the Blessed Realm Ferocious Beast also felt that something was wrong and did not continue to attack. However, its divine telekinesis was still locked onto Moronyu. As long as it wanted to, it could kill Moronyu at any time. "Brother, we meet again." A voice rang in Moronyu's ears. Moronyu looked in the direction of the voice, only to see Lu Wenyang slowly walking over with a smile on his face. Moronyu could not treat Lu Wenyang coldly with a smile on his face, so he immediately nodded slightly at him. But that was all. However, Lu Wenyang quickly came to Moronyu's side. "Brother, these ferocious beasts didn't do anything to you, right? I think you must have some trump cards. I'm afraid that the treasures of the Burning Flame Ancestor have already been taken by you, right?" Lu Wenyang looked at the ferocious beasts, but he said to Moronyu. Moronyu did not comment. He did not have time to deal with Lu Wenyang now. However, Moronyu did not notice that a murderous intent flashed in Lu Wenyang's eyes at this time. Whoosh! Suddenly, Lu Wenyang attacked. A dagger of the origin artifact level appeared in his hand. With his power injected, the dagger emitted a terrifying blue light and quickly stabbed at the back of Moronyu's head. This was a poison dagger. Seeing this scene, the ferocious beasts and the other cultivators were stunned. They did not expect that Lu Wenyang, who had been talking to Moronyu like a brother just now, would stab him in the back. What a pity that this guy's treasures have been taken away by this insidious villain. After being stunned for a while, the cultivators felt that it was a pity. Of course, they were not sorry that Moronyu was about to die, but that Moronyu's treasures had nothing to do with them. Only the ferocious beasts had a mocking look in their eyes. Lu Wenyang's strength seemed to be good, but could he be compared with the ferocious beasts of the half-step to Creation Realm? Moronyu could kill a half-step to Creation Realm ferocious beast with one punch. Even if Lu Wenyang had the advantage of a sneak attack, how could Moronyu, who was so powerful, not be able to react? Seeing the mocking looks in the eyes of the ferocious beasts, Lu Wenyang suddenly felt uneasy. But now that things had come to this, he would definitely not stop. Therefore, he stabbed the dagger in his hand at the back of Moronyu's head even faster. This dagger was bestowed to him by his sect, and it was a Bright World Realm origin artifact. It was also stained with a strong poison that could attack one's soul. Even a high-level Bright World Realm cultivator would definitely die after being stabbed by this dagger. Therefore, Moronyu was dead meat. A smile appeared on Lu Wenyang's face, as if all the treasures Moronyu had obtained had already become his. However, it was still too early for him to be complacent. Whoosh! A large hand appeared out of thin air and directly grabbed his wrist. Suddenly, his large hand could no longer move forward. Lu Wenyang was shocked and turned to look, only to see Moronyu looking over. The hand that grabbed his wrist was one of Moronyu's hands. "What?" Moronyu looked at Lu Wenyang calmly and asked. "No reason. I just want to kill you and steal your treasures." Lu Wenyang smiled ferociously, but the dagger in his hand shot out fiercely towards the back of Moronyu's head. Moronyu's eyes were indifferent as he stretched out his other hand and caught the dagger. "If I'm not wrong, the poison on this dagger should be targeting the soul, right? I wonder if you have the antidote?" Moronyu said calmly. Lu Wenyang had a bad feeling in his heart. Then his vision blurred, and he felt a sharp pain in his thigh. Moronyu had stabbed him with the dagger. Lu Wenyang's expression changed drastically. Just as he was about to speak, he let out an earth-shattering scream. At this moment, his soul felt like it was being bitten by thousands of ants. It was itchy, sore, and painful. He could even see that his soul was being corroded at a rapid rate. No matter how he tried to expel it, he could not get rid of the poison. Lu Wenyang finally tasted the feeling of his soul being corroded personally. In the past, he was just a bystander and a perpetrator. I'll fight it out with you. Lu Wenyang knew that he was definitely going to die because there was no antidote for the poison, unless there was a creation realm expert to expel the poison for him. But where would there be a creation realm expert to help him? Chapter 1918. Go all out? What are you going to use to fight me? Murong Yu glanced at Lu Wenyang with disdain and slapped Lu Wenyang's head at the same time. A powerful force surged into Lu Wenyang's body and sealed all of his power in an instant. Murong Yu's true combat power was a whole realm higher than Lu Wenyang's. Lu Wenyang was simply courting death for daring to plot against him. Ah! Lu Wenyang let out an extremely shrill scream. At the same time, he rolled on the ground due to the intense pain in his soul. He looked extremely miserable. However, everyone present only looked at him coldly. Even his companions did not try to save him. What a joke. Murong Yu's power was unfathomable. If they tried to help, wouldn't they be afraid that they would end up like Lu Wenyang? At the same time, they despised Lu Wenyang. Lu Wenyang had always acted like a gentleman, but they did not expect him to be so despicable. The powerful cultivator on the beast side did not make a move either. For the creation realm beast, it only needed one slap to kill Murong Yu and all the other cultivators present. However, a voice in his head told him that he absolutely could not make a move now. That was because he felt that the atmosphere around him was becoming increasingly strange. Murong Yu had already raised his power to the maximum and was ready to use all kinds of techniques. However, he did not find anything special in the hall. If there had to be something special about it, it would be the portrait. The portrait. Murong Yu's heart suddenly trembled, and he looked over. In a daze, Fan Hua in the portrait actually glanced at him. Murong Yu's soul trembled, and all the hair on his body stood on end. At the same time, his heart was enveloped by an extremely strong aura of death. Boom! At that moment, the creation realm ferocious beast suddenly attacked. Its target was not Murong Yu, but the portrait. It must have sensed the strangeness of the portrait. However, when the terrifying power of the creation realm struck the portrait, layers of ripples appeared in the void near the portrait. Then, the power disappeared into thin air. Whoosh! At this moment, everyone's eyes were fixed on the painting. At this point, even an idiot would know what was going on. When it saw that its attack was ineffective, the blessed realm beast's expression turned sour. It took a step forward and swung its claws at the painting again. Bang! After a loud bang, the claws of the ferocious beast in the blessed realm shattered. Its entire body was sent flying by a terrifying force. Murong Yu and the others were shocked. This was an existence at the creation realm, yet it could not do anything to the painting. Could it be that the burning ancestor wasn't dead, but was hiding in that painting? Thinking of this, some people began to retreat. However, they soon heard a series of wails. This was because they realized that the entrance to the hall had disappeared without them noticing. Boom, boom, boom. Some people began to erupt with power, bombarding the walls of the hall. But they didn't know what these walls were made of, but no matter how they attacked, they didn't move at all. Murong Yu retreated a lot without moving. At the same time, he looked at the portrait with vigilance. Sigh. At this moment, a faint sigh suddenly sounded in the ears of Murong Yu and the others. Although the voice was not loud, it was very clear. Who is it? Murong Yu's pupils shrank suddenly, and all the hair on his body stood on end. The others had the same reaction as Murong Yu. They looked left and right, and there was fear on their faces. Just a ferocious beast in the creation realm? There isn't even a bright world realm cultivator? Well, since I've already woken up, use your blood to wake me up completely. The faint voice continued to sound in everyone's ears. At the same time, a figure slowly appeared in front of the portrait. It was an old man who looked exactly the same as the portrait in the painting. The burning ancestor. When they saw this figure, everyone present was so frightened that they retreated back. Legend had it that the burning ancestor was a supreme existence at the peak of the creation realm. In front of the burning ancestor, there were just a group of ants. The burning ancestor could kill them with a flick of his finger. Just a wisp of remnant soul. I'll kill you. The ferocious beast in the creation realm roared and clawed at the burning ancestor, intending to kill him. The burning ancestor coldly glanced at the creation realm ferocious beast and then pointed his finger. Puff! The creation realm ferocious beast directly withered on the ground. There was no longer any fluctuation of power in its body. It seemed that the burning ancestor had sealed all the power in its body with a single point of his finger. You seal my power? The creation realm ferocious beast roared, and its eyes flashed fiercely. The burning ancestor didn't even look at the creation realm ferocious beast. His eyes began to sweep across everyone's faces. All the cultivators and ferocious beasts that the burning ancestor looked at collapsed on the ground. That gaze was simply too terrifying. They felt that if the burning ancestor wanted to kill them, he only needed to look at them, and they would explode and die. Was this the strength of the peak of the creation realm? Everyone was shocked. Behind the crowd, Moronyu had a bad feeling in his heart. Sure enough, as soon as the bad feeling grew in his heart, a terrifying gaze had already penetrated his body. It was the burning ancestor's gaze. Moronyu forced a smile on his face and bowed to the burning ancestor. Senior, I didn't know that you were just cultivating here. I'm willing to return all the treasures you gave me. The burning ancestor looked at Moronyu with a smile on his face. Can you spit out the soul power and the chaos origin liquid? Moronyu was stunned. He had only absorbed some of the chaos origin liquid, and most of it had not been absorbed. He could return it. However, he couldn't return the soul power. Senior, I'm willing to compensate you, Moronyu said again. The burning ancestor didn't say anything. He just looked at Moronyu indifferently with a teasing look in his eyes. What are you going to compensate me with? Moronyu sneered inwardly. The burning ancestor was looking down on him. Not to mention the soul power and the chaos origin liquid. He could even compensate for something 100 million times more precious. The chaotic celestial body, the Hichu Luoshu, the Yin-Yang cauldron, and other treasures were all countless times more precious than the chaos origin liquid. However, Moronyu couldn't compensate the burning ancestor for those things. Actually, you don't need to compensate me for anything. I'm giving you those things, the burning ancestor suddenly said. Hearing that, Moronyu didn't feel happy. On the contrary, he felt a trace of danger, a strong sense of danger. However, Moronyu's face showed a touch of joy. Senior, are you going to give me your inheritance? The burning ancestor shook his head. No, not just my inheritance. What you have is better than my inheritance. I can even help you reach the peak of the creation realm quickly. As he spoke, the burning ancestor stretched out his hand and grabbed at Moronyu. A strong force instantly enveloped Moronyu. Before Moronyu could react, Moronyu had been detained. Do you know why I want to improve your soul and body? The burning ancestor looked at Moronyu and laughed. Moronyu shook his head, but a terrible killing intent flashed in the depths of his eyes. Because I, your ancestor, will devour your soul and take over your body. However, your cultivation is still too weak. Well, these ants can also improve your strength to the peak of the bright world realm or even the creation realm. As he spoke, the burning ancestor glanced at the hall. Bang, bang, bang. Almost at the same time, hundreds of cultivators and ferocious beasts in the hall directly exploded, turning into clouds of blood mist that condensed in the void. This essence blood should be able to improve your strength. The burning ancestor was still smiling. At the same time, he grabbed at the void. In an instant, the bloody mist from the explosions of the ferocious beasts and cultivators condensed into a torrent of blood that shot towards Moronyu. At this time, Moronyu's strength had been sealed, so he could not resist. He could only watch the blood enter his body. Refine it for me. The burning ancestor patted Moronyu's head with a big hand. The strength of the peak of the creation realm rushed in crazily and began to help Murong-Yu refine the blood. Because he was preparing to take over Murong-Yu's body, the burning ancestor was very serious in refining. He removed all the impurities. In the end, only the purest power poured into Murong-Yu's meridians and improved his strength. Murong-Yu's strength rapidly increased at a speed visible to the naked eye. After a while, he had reached the peak of the chaotic realm, half-step bright world realm. If this continued, Murong-Yu would break through to the bright world realm very soon. With the burning ancestor's help, he would soon reach the peak of the bright world realm. Murong-Yu naturally did not resist the improvement of his strength. However, now was not a good time to improve. This was because once he improved, he would not be able to enter the Sun Sect. The Sun Sect could only recruit disciples below the Bright World Realm. Even if someone who reached the Bright World Realm could become a disciple of the Sun Sect, they could not become a core disciple. If they could not become a core disciple, they would not be qualified to compete for the position of the Sun Sect's leader in the future. The Sun Monarch. Murong, you must become the ruler of the solar system. Only then could he better protect his family and even the Chaos Shenzhen. Therefore, Murong Yu gritted his teeth and refused to let go. He absolutely cannot break through. As long as he did not break through the realm barrier, he would not break through. Although he cannot break through, a large amount of power continued to pour into his body. In the end, it accumulated in his meridians. Soon, his meridians were about to explode. If this continued, Murong Yu would definitely explode and die. This was something that Murong Yu and the Burning Flame ancestor didn't want to see. It had not been easy for him to wait for Murong Yu. How could he let this body go to waste? Moreover, Murong Yu had already swept away all the soul power and chaos origin liquid he had left behind. Even if he found a suitable body, he did not have the soul power and chaos origin liquid to improve Murong Yu's soul and body. Chapter 1919. Brat, you're courting death. The burning ancestor was finally angry. The enormous divine sense poured into Murong Yu's body and began to drive the power in Murong Yu's body to break through the realm barrier. However, for some reason, he couldn't find Murong Yu's realm barrier. Release the seal on my power, or I'd rather die than submit. Murong Yu's eyes were red, and he roared ferociously, blue veins popping out. Murong Yu wouldn't really die. Anyway, there was still a chance for the nirvana of the phoenix. Moreover, even if Murong Yu chose to die, he didn't want his soul to be devoured by the burning ancestor and his body to be possessed. In that case, he wouldn't be him. The burning ancestor roared. His voice was filled with extreme fury. It was the first time he had seen such a situation where he couldn't forcibly raise his realm. In fact, at the beginning, when he saw the burning ancestor's divine sense pour into his body to help him break through the realm barrier, Murong Yu was shocked. He was afraid that the burning ancestor had succeeded. However, what happened next made him extremely surprised. In any case, Murong Yu was able to see the barrier in his realm. Furthermore, as long as he wanted to, he could directly break through the barrier. But why couldn't the burning ancestor see it? There was only one reason, and that was because of the chaotic celestial record. Long ago in the holy world, the chaotic celestial record had been perfected. But the perfected chaotic celestial record didn't mean that there was no need to cultivate. Instead, he had to continue cultivating. Only by continuing to cultivate would one be able to see the barrier to the next realm. Only then would one be able to break through the barrier and reach a higher realm. Murong Yu didn't know before and thought that others could see his realm barrier. But he knew from the burning ancestor that only he could see his realm barrier. In other words, if Murong Yu wanted, he could take the initiative to show his realm barrier so that others could see it. Since the burning ancestor couldn't see his realm barrier, things would be easy. Swish, the burning ancestor directly released Murong Yu's realm barrier. But his enormous divine sense still enveloped Murong Yu's body. As long as Murong Yu made any strange movements, he could control Murong Yu again. In any case, the burning ancestor was the master of this hall. Murong couldn't escape even if he had wings. Rumble, after recovering his strength, Murong began to circulate his power crazily, suppressing all the power into his body. Although his body had reached the peak of the chaotic realm, his body had still not reached the peak of the chaotic realm. The Chaos Origin liquid also cleansed a large amount of impurities from his body, but there was still a lot of spotty. As a result, even more impurities were expelled from Murong body as a large amount of energy entered his body. At the same time, Murong success. Because tesses, s. As a result, Murong body would become stronger and stronger. Although his body had also reached the peak of the chaotic realm, the more solid his body was, the more powerful his physical strength would be. Moreover, his body's defense would become stronger and stronger. Impurities were constantly expelled, and his bones, flesh, and blood were constantly condensing. Then, a strange scene happened. Murong wasn't tall and strong, but at least his normal height began to shrink gradually. As time passed, his body became smaller and smaller. The strangest thing was that his face had also regained its youthfulness. 18 years old, 16 years old. In the end, Murong had completely turned into his appearance when he was 15 or 16 years old. He had completely become younger. The burning ancestor was dumbfounded. Even Murong was a little depressed. But he couldn't stop, so he could only keep suppressing his body. This was because the burning ancestor was still sending a lot of power over. Was this bastard trying to turn Murong into a baby? Of course. He wanted to improve Murong body to a stronger and higher realm. However, because his cultivation realm hadn't broken through, Murong body couldn't break through either. But what made Murong feel relieved was that although his body continued to condense, it would no longer continue to shrink. Otherwise, it would be embarrassing if he really turned into a baby. However, there was also a limit to how condensed the body could be. Soon, Murong reached his limit. His body was still at the peak of the chaotic realm, but its strength was already comparable to a Bright World Realm origin weapon. Even a mid-level Bright World Realm expert would find it difficult to shatter his body. Moreover, Murong had condensed a lot of power to every inch of his body. This power would be released slowly as Murong's strength increased, pushing Murong's body to gradually become stronger. A soul at the peak of the reincarnation realm is comparable to a Bright World Realm physical body and the peak of the chaotic realm. Although it's still too low, as long as you cultivate for a period of time, you can recover to the creation realm or even the peak of the creation realm. The burning ancestor beamed with joy. Whoosh! Before he finished speaking, his wisp of remnant soul had turned into a stream of light and rushed into Murong's soul space. What's this? When he saw the incomparably huge soul sphere in Murong's soul space, the burning flame ancestor was instantly stunned. He could obtain a lot of soul power, which showed that he had a certain understanding of soul cultivators. But he had never heard of such a soul sphere in the soul space of a soul cultivator. No wonder, Murong, you could only reach the peak of the reincarnation realm with a large amount of soul power. Most of the soul power had condensed into this soul sphere. The burning ancestor thought in his heart, but he had already rushed into the soul sphere. Because he saw Murong's soul sitting cross-legged on the soul sphere, cultivating. He only needed to devour Murong's soul, and his soul would almost be able to recover to its peak. What are you doing? Seeing the burning ancestor's soul rushing over, Murong's soul showed a look of panic. The burning ancestor sneered and did not speak. He opened his mouth and swallowed Murong's soul. But in the next moment, his face suddenly changed. Boom! An earth-shattering sound came from the burning ancestor's soul. The terrifying power tore a part of the burning ancestor's soul. The burning ancestor's soul, which was already a remnant soul, became even more broken and weak. Bastard! How dare you self-destruct your soul? The burning ancestor was furious. At this moment, he was already seriously injured, and he never thought that Murong would be so ruthless as to self-destruct his soul. Soul devouring, devour. At this moment, a furious roar sounded in the entire soul space. At this moment, the soul sphere in which the burning ancestor soul was located began to spin. Strands of terrifying, devouring force erupted from the ball of souls. It directly enveloped the burning ancestor's soul and began to devour it. At the same time, the souls transformed into blades, swords, and other origin weapons, launching the craziest and most terrifying attacks on the burning ancestor's soul. The burning ancestor was furious. "Little bastard, you're not dead yet? How dare you deceive me? You're really courting death. I won't die before you do." Murongyu's cold voice rang out in the soul space. As he spoke, the devouring power and attacks of the soul sphere became even more violent. It bombarded the burning ancestor wildly, reducing him to a horrible state. At the same time, the burning ancestor's injuries became worse and worse. "How did you do it? I've clearly devoured your soul. Your soul has clearly exploded." The burning ancestor blocked Murongyu's soul attacks as he roared out. A scoff rang out. "Burning ancestor, to think that you're at the peak of the manifestation realm. Haven't you heard of clones?" "Clones?" The burning ancestor's eyes shone with terrifying cold light. "Your soul can actually clone itself?" "That's right. The soul that the burning ancestor had devoured before was only a clone of Murongyu's soul. Murongyu had already learned how to create clones in the Saint's world. At that time, his soul had even split into a true dragon, Murong's dragon. Previously, after learning that the burning ancestor wanted to devour his soul and possess him, after recovering his strength, Murongyu split into a soul clone that was exactly the same as his real soul. This soul was only at the same level as his original soul in terms of power. However, there was nothing without memories. However, Murongyu's original soul had already entered the Hichu Luo Shu. In this way, even if the burning ancestor devoured Murongyu's soul clone and possessed his body, Murongyu would not truly die. Moreover, he would have a chance to use the Hichu Luo Shu to directly escape. In the future, he could condense a new body. Although it would not be as good as his current body, he could still cultivate it back. However, Murongyu was unwilling to let his body be possessed just like that. Therefore, after the burning ancestor devoured his soul clone excitedly, Murongyu directly detonated the soul clone. As expected, the burning ancestor was still seriously injured. His soul, which was already in tatters, was now on the verge of being destroyed. At this time, Murongyu already had the ability to fight him. "Burning ancestor, you should kill yourself. I will help you pass on your inheritance." Murongyu attacked the burning ancestor while provoking him with words. "Little bastard, you will be the one to die. I'll definitely devour your soul and take over your physical body. Then, I will pamper your women." "Ha ha!" The burning ancestor laughed and retorted. In a battle of strength and words, they would do anything. However, in the end, it was Murongyu who was a little sinister. He tricked the burning ancestor first and caused him to fail miserably. As the saying goes, one wrong step leads to another. His fate was sealed the moment the burning flame ancestor devoured Murongyu's soul avatar. However, even a cornered beast would put up a desperate fight, let alone the burning ancestor, who was once at the peak of the creation realm. How could he easily admit defeat and be killed by Murongyu, and even have his soul devoured by Murongyu? Get his inheritance. Chapter 1920. The burning ancestor was filled with hatred. If his soul had not been shattered and he was only left with a remnant soul, he would have killed Murongyu long ago. If he was not only a remnant soul, he would have used a powerful origin device to attack or defend. Unfortunately, he was only a remnant soul and could not carry any origin device. Moreover, all his origin devices and elixirs had been taken away by Murongyu. Originally, the burning ancestor did this on purpose. Anyway, after Murongyu took them away, they would be taken over by him. Wouldn't they become his again? Moreover, he did not need to take them away. However, what he did not expect was that Muronyu was too difficult to chew. Not only could he not chew him, but he was also in danger of being completely killed. Moreover, the Burning Ancestor was not a soul cultivator himself, so he had almost no combat skills or offensive means about the soul. He only relied on his powerful soul power to attack. However, these were useless against Muronyu. After a period of life-and-death battles, the Burning Ancestor's soul became weaker and weaker. If this continued, he would definitely die. If he died, it would be fine. Anyway, he was already dead. However, after he died, he would become Muronyu. If Muronyu devoured his soul, it would be possible for Muronyu to become more powerful. Even if I die, I will take you with me. Seeing that he was powerless to reverse the situation, the Burning Ancestor became ruthless. He began to increase his strength and self-destruct like Murongyu's soul doppelganger. Even if Murongyu's main soul was not here, as long as Murongyu's soul space and this soul ball were destroyed, where would Murongyu's soul stay in the future? This body would also be destroyed. Since he, the Burning Ancestor, could not get what he wanted, no one else could. Burning Ancestor, you want to self-destruct. Just as the Burning Ancestor was increasing his strength and preparing to self-destruct, Murongyu's furious voice suddenly came. Hearing Murongyu's shocked and angry voice, Funhua couldn't help but feel a trace of pleasure in his heart. However, he quickly came to his senses. He was too useless. After all, he was at the peak of the creation realm. Now, he actually felt happy because of Murongyu's anger. Furthermore, this was because he wanted to self-detonate his soul. Wasn't this too depraved? However, there was nothing he could do about it. He had already died once. Before he died, he had designed all of these. But in the end, he was powerless to reverse the situation. Whoosh! At this moment, a black shadow suddenly appeared in the distant void. In a split second, the black shadow had already shot past Funhua's soul. Puff! Burning Flame Ancestor felt a sharp pain. At the same time, the power that was constantly increasing suddenly stagnated and then stopped. In the end, it was like a deflated balloon that was completely deflated. Little bastard, you tricked me? The Burning Ancestor roared in shock and anger. His current expression was very interesting. Originally, it was as if he had eaten a supreme delicacy, but halfway through, he found that he had eaten a fly. So what if I tricked you? With me here, you can't even self-detonate. Murongyu's cold voice sounded. At the same time, the soul sphere rotated even more vigorously, devouring and depriving Funhua's power faster. Moreover, this time it was the weapon fragment that hit Funhua, directly cutting his soul into two. Under Murongyu's attack, his soul force forcibly separated the two halves of Funhua's soul. As a result, Funhua's power became weaker and weaker. Whoosh! Whoosh! The weapon fragment continued to attack. Burning Flame Ancestor's current strength could no longer resist the attack of the weapon fragment. As a result, he was pitifully divided into pieces, and in the end, all of them were devoured by Murongyu. Little bastard, one day you'll end up like me. In the end, Funhua only left an unwilling roar, and then he was devoured by Murongyu. Phew! Murongyu's soul once again returned to his body. At the same time, he breathed a sigh of relief and opened his eyes. At this time, his face revealed a look of luck. Funhua's strength was very terrifying. If he had not been seriously injured by Murongyu's self-detonation of his soul doppelganger, Murongyu's body would have been seized. However, in the end, Murongyu still managed to emerge victorious. Whoosh! Murongyu's body flashed, and he disappeared on the spot. In Hichu Luoshu, Murongyu was already sitting cross-legged on the ground, entering a state of cultivation. At this time, he was refining Funhua's soul with all his strength. During this process, he was constantly improving Funhua's memory. Because it was a remnant soul, Funhua's memory was not complete. However, after the final piecing together, Murongyu still restored Funhua's various important combat skills and cultivation methods. However, Many of Funhua's other memories were already gone. However, Murongyu had already restored the events of the Four-Yuan Star that Murongyu was now in. Back then, Funhua was a top existence in the Four-Yuan Star. He was an expert at the peak of the creation realm and was one of the most powerful people in this world. Everything happened so suddenly and without any warning. A terrifying force suddenly appeared, enveloping the entire Four-Yuan Star. Most of the people were killed by the terrifying force before they could even react. As one of the most powerful existences in the Four-Yuan Star, Funhua reacted in time. However, so what if he reacted? He could not escape at all, or rather, he could not escape at all. The force was so terrifying that it directly wiped out the others who were in the same realm as Funhua. Funhua had to use all kinds of treasures to escape in the end. Moreover, it was only a remnant soul that escaped. Moreover, he was seriously injured. In his current state, he could not even condense his body. Moreover, he could not appear outside for a long time. Otherwise, his soul would become weaker and weaker and eventually die. Therefore, he had set up the Funhua Dojo to attract experts so that he could take over their bodies and be reborn. It was also because of this that Murongyu had killed him. Otherwise, if it had been an ordinary creation realm expert, Murongyu would not have been able to escape from death, let alone kill him. The Funhua ancestors speculated that a supreme existence had wiped out the entire Four-Yuan Star during the disaster back then. That person had surpassed the creation realm and was a supreme existence above the creation realm. However, the most powerful existence in the solar system was at the peak of the creation realm. What realm was an existence stronger than the peak of the creation realm? Who was that person? Why had he killed all the cultivators on the Four-Yuan Star? The Funhua ancestor was completely puzzled about this. He speculated that something on the Four-Yuan Star must have attracted the attention of that expert. Could it be the star core? Murongyu frowned slightly. Only the star core could attract the attention of an existence that surpassed the creation realm. However, the Four-Yuan Star had not been close to death back then. Could that supreme existence have killed all the cultivators on the Four-Yuan Star to hasten the death of the Four-Yuan Star? If that person had really come for the star core of the Four-Yuan Star, would he have made a move this time? Murongyu could not help but have goosebumps all over his body at the thought of this. A creation realm expert was already very terrifying. If there was an existence even more terrifying than them, Murongyu would not stand a chance at all. The only thing he could do was to run as far as he could. However, this was all in the future. Murongyu's attention was quickly attracted by Funhua's soul. Although Funhua was not a soul cultivator, his soul contained an extremely large amount of soul power. After devouring his soul, Murongyu's soul was about to break through. Therefore, he immersed himself in cultivation and began to break through the soul realm with all his might. Murongyu, who was in the midst of cultivation, did not notice that the frequency of the sun's sex light flashing on his body had slowed down a lot. Sometimes, there was even a flash of light for many days. If Murongyu looked at the number in the jade slip at this time, he would definitely be shocked. The number that had originally exceeded 100 billion was now less than 100,000. In other words, only 100,000 people were still fighting on the Four-Yuan Star. Most of the others had been killed or rescued by the experts of the Sun Sect, losing the qualifications to become disciples of the Sun Sect. Deep underground on the Four-Yuan Star, the Sea Heavenly King hid in the place he had opened up with a gloomy expression. Bastard, there is no heaven-earth essence chi in this world. It is full of endless death chi. If I continue to stay here, I will be attacked by the death chi. Bastard, why haven't the others all died yet? The Sea Heavenly King was furious. When he first entered this place, he had encountered several bright world realm fierce beasts. After a great battle, he had relied on various methods and treasures to finally shake off those fierce beasts. However, he was also frightened, so he found a place to hide. However, even if he hid, those fierce beasts did not let him go and would eventually discover his existence. Therefore, he could only escape and find another place to hide. However, After a long time, he had used up all the elixirs he had brought. Now, there was no heaven-earth essence chi in this world. Once it all turned into death chi, the death chi would attack him and eventually turn him into some kind of monster. At the same time, many people were like the Sea Heavenly King. In fact, more people found a place to hide after entering the origin star. After all, the Sun Sect did not ask them to kill the fierce beasts. They only wanted them to survive. They successfully persevered until the last 10,000 people on the 4-yuan star. However, even so, people continued to die. Now, the Sea Heavenly King was not only paying attention to his surroundings, but also staring at the jade slip in his hand. At this time, the number displayed on the jade slip was less than 50,000. As long as this number decreased to 10,000, he could leave this damned origin star and become a disciple of the Sun Sect. Moronu, you better not die on the 4-yuan star, because I will kill you personally. The Sea Heavenly King growled with a ferocious expression, his eyes filled with hatred. While the Sea Heavenly King was cursing Moronu, who was not far away, slowly opened his eyes. He had broken through a chaotic space realm soul. You're tuning in to the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.